Hello everyone, and welcome to the Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Naruto became the supreme god of creation and death, RN from Arceus and Shinigami Naruto x Cynthia x Hinata, Pokémon Multiverse. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. Convergence of Destinies. The sky fractured like glass above the valley of the end. Lightning that wasn't lightning. Too violet, too deliberate in its jagged path. Split the clouds as two figures clashed atop the ancient statues, their chakra signatures burning so bright they seemed to warp the very air. Naruto Uzumaki's Rasengan spiraled in his palm, miniature storm compressed into a perfect sphere, the culmination of his father's legacy and his own unbreakable determination. Across from him, Sasuke Uchiha's Chidori screamed with the voice of 1,000 birds. Crackling electricity extending from his fingers like the talons of some predatory god. "This ends now, Sasuke," Naruto shouted, his voice carrying over the roar of their techniques. His eyes, normally azure as a summer sky, had taken on the golden-orange hue of his sage mode, slitted pupils betraying the Nine-Tails influence. Sasuke's mismatched eyes, one the blood red of the Sharingan, one the concentric purple of the Rinnegan, narrowed in contempt. "You're right about one thing, dead last. It ends today." They leapt toward each other, their final attacks poised to collide in a conflagration that would rewrite the landscape itself. But in the moment before impact, something impossible occurred. The space between them ripped. Not tore, not split, ripped, as though reality itself were nothing more than tissue paper in the hands of a careless giant. Through the tear came a darkness unlike anything either shinobi had witnessed. Not the absence of light, but the absence of everything, a void so complete it seemed to devour sound, color, and thought. "Sasuke!" Naruto shouted, his voice suddenly thin and distant. He felt himself being pulled toward the anomaly, an inexorable gravitational force that no amount of chakra could counter. For the briefest moment, he saw something in Sasuke's eyes he'd never witnessed before. Raw, unfiltered fear. "What is this, Sasuke's voice distorted as he fought against the pull, his Susanoo manifesting in skeletal form around him. "Is this you're doing, Naruto? Does it look like I'm doing this?" Naruto created a dozen shadow clones that formed a human chain, anchoring themselves to the stone fingers of Hashirama's statue. But one by one, they popped into smoke as the void's hunger intensified. The tear widened, revealing glimpses of something beyond, a twisted landscape of floating islands and inverted waterfalls, all bathed in an eerie purple light. Gravity itself seemed to lose meaning there, with stones suspended in midair and landmasses floating at impossible angles. Sasuke's Susanoo began to crack, purple flames sputtering as the void consumed his chakra. "This isn't genjutsu," he grunted through clenched teeth. "This is something else." As the last shadow clone dispelled, Naruto felt himself lifted off his feet, pulled inexorably toward the dimensional wound. He reached desperately for anything to hold onto, but his fingers found only empty air. "Kurama," he called internally to the Nine-Tails. "What's happening?" The fox's voice came back strained, as though speaking through static. "This isn't natural, Kit. Something's tearing the fabric of our world. I can't." The connection severed abruptly as Naruto was sucked into the void. The last thing he saw was Sasuke, engulfed in the remnants of his Susanoo, being flung in the opposite direction as the tear collapsed in on itself like a dying star. Then darkness, complete and absolute, the sensation of falling without falling, of movement without direction. Time lost all meaning in the void between worlds. When consciousness returned, Naruto found himself suspended in a realm of impossibility. The distortion world had no regard or the laws of physics that governed the realities Naruto knew. Islands of rock hung in nothingness, some upside down, others at vertiginous angles. Waterfalls flowed upward into lakes that should have spilled their contents but didn't. Platforms of dark stone formed labyrinths that doubled back on themselves in ways that hurt the mind to contemplate. And it was cold, not the natural cold of winter, but the absence of warmth that comes from being somewhere life was never meant to exist. "Where am I?" Naruto's voice echoed strangely, as though the space itself were absorbing his words. MPTED to channel chakra to his feet to stand on one of the floating platforms, but the energy responded sluggishly, reluctantly. You are where few mortals have ever trod and fewer still have survived to speak of. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, ancient and resonant, carrying undertones that seemed to vibrate in Naruto's bones. From the purple-tinged shadows emerged a creature that defied comprehension, a massive serpentine form with 6 ghostly streamers flowing from its back, golden armor plates adorning its head and torso. 6 spikes protruded from its body, giving it the appearance of a centipede crossed with a dragon. Its face was hidden behind a golden mask with red streaks, revealing only baleful red eyes that gleamed with ancient malice. I am Giratina, ruler of this realm, watcher of the spaces between spaces. The creature circled Naruto, its massive body somehow both corporeal and incorporeal as it passed through solid objects without disturbing them. And you, little human, are an anomaly. Naruto's mind raced through his knowledge of the shinobi world. Nothing in his experience or education had prepared him for this entity. Not a tailed beast, not a summons, not anything he recognized. Look, I don't know how I got here, but I need to get back. My friend. Giratina's laugh was like stones grinding together. The one who sought to kill you. Curious definition of friendship you humans have. The creature drifted closer, its face mere inches from Naruto's. The young shinobi could feel its breath, not warm like a living being's, but carrying the cold of deep space. More curious still is what I sense within you. Giratina's eyes narrowed to slits. You carry death and life in equal measure, mortal. The essence of the void and the spark of creation. You should not be. Naruto felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ambient temperature. What are you talking about? I'm Naruto Uzumaki, shinobi of the Hidden Leaf, Jinchuriki of the Nine-Tailed Fox. And future Hokage. Believe it. Giratina seemed to grow larger, darkness gathering around its form. You are more than that, though you do not yet know it. And that makes you dangerous. Its voice dropped to a threatening rumble. I eliminate dangers to the cosmic order. The dragon-like entity reared back, a sphere of shadowy energy forming between its jaws. Naruto braced himself, drawing on Kurama's chakra to form a defensive cloak. A brilliant light cut through the darkness, so pure and white that it seemed to cleanse the very air. Giratina recoiled with a shriek of surprise and fear. You overstep, guardian of the reverse. The new voice was melodic yet commanding, carrying authority that made even Giratina's presence seem diminished. From the light emerged a being unlike any Naruto had ever seen. Quadrupedal and equine in basic form, but clearly divine in nature. Its body was white with a gray underbelly, and a golden cross-like wheel adorned its midsection. Its face was noble and serene, eyes reflecting wisdom accumulated over eons. Arceus, Giratina hissed, backing away. This does not concern you, creator. All that threatens the balance concerns me. Arceus moved to hover protectively near Naruto. Especially when it involves one who carries my essence. Naruto looked between the two beings, completely lost. You're what now? Arceus turned its gentle gaze to Naruto. There is much you do not understand, child of two worlds. Your presence here is no accident, though the timing is unexpected. Two worlds. Look, all I know is I was fighting Sasuke 1 minute. Then got sucked through some weird tear in the sky. I need to get back to my friends, they're counting on me. The boundaries between dimensions grow thin, Arceus said, its voice tinged with concern. What should have remained separate for millennia more has begun to merge prematurely. Giratina circled restlessly. The boy's awakening was not meant for this age. The consequences could be catastrophic. Wait, what awakening? Naruto demanded, frustration mounting. Will someone please tell me what's going on? Arceus approached, its hooves making no sound as it moved across emptiness. You were born of impossibility, Naruto Uzumaki. Your human parents were but vessels, temporary guardians for something far greater. Images flashed in Naruto's mind, his father Minato and mother Kushina. Their sacrifice to seal the 9 tails within him. No, my parents died protecting me and the village. I know who I am. You know only part of what you are, Arceus corrected gently. In you flows the blood of the Shinigami, the death god of your world, and my own divine essence, the power of creation itself. Naruto felt as though the ground had dropped away beneath him, though in this place. There was no true ground to begin with. That's impossible. Improbable, Arceus amended, but far from impossible. During a rare cosmic alignment, when the barriers between dimensions thinned, a fragment of my being and a portion of the Shinigami's essence merged and sought physical form. The aberration should have been destroyed, Giratina interjected, red eyes gleaming. No mortal should wield such power. And yet here he stands, Arceus countered, having lived a human life, experiencing joy and suffering, love and hatred, all the things that temper power with wisdom. Before Naruto could process these revelations, a tremor shook the distortion world. Floating islands collided, and the purple haze darkened to an ominous crimson. It begins, Arceus said gravely. The dimensions collapse upon each other. Naruto felt a sudden, searing pain in his chest, as though something long dormant had awakened and was clawing its way to the surface. He doubled over, golden chakra erupting from his body in uncontrolled bursts. What's happening to me? He managed through gritted teeth. Your true nature emerges, Arceus explained. The convergence of worlds has triggered what should have remained latent for centuries more. Another violent tremor, stronger than the first. In the distance, a portion of the distortion world seemed to fold in on itself, revealing glimpses of a reality beyond, mountains and lakes bathed in sunlight, so normal and tangible compared to this place of chaos. The human world, Giratina observed. Not his, but the other. The Pokémon world experiences the convergence as well, Arceus confirmed. Two realities never meant to touch are being forced together. Pokémon, Naruto repeated, the unfamiliar word strange on his tongue. Creatures of my creation, Arceus explained, beings of elemental power that share the world with humans in that reality. Different from your summons or tailed beasts, yet serving similar roles in the cosmic balance. Another spasm of pain drove Naruto to his knees. The chakra surrounding him changed, becoming less like Kurama's fiery energy and more like liquid light, rippling with creative potential. I can't control it, he gasped. Nor should you try, not yet, Arceus advised. Let it flow through you naturally. Your body must adapt to contain powers long suppressed. And if it cannot, Giratina's tone suggested it hoped for failure. Then all three of our worlds face oblivion, Arceus answered soberly. Through the haze of pain, Naruto saw more tears appearing in the fabric of the distortion world, each revealing glimpses of different realities, his own world with its familiar forests and mountains, and this other, Pokémon world, with range creatures and unfamiliar landscapes. I need to help them. Naruto struggled to his feet, the determination that had defined his ninja career asserting itself even now. My friends, they won't understand what's happening. Your courage remains intact, despite the awakening, Arceus observed with what sounded like approval. Perhaps you are indeed ready, though circumstances have forced our hand. Ready for what? Naruto asked, standing straighter as the pain subsided to a dull throb. To begin fulfilling your purpose, Arceus replied. To become what you were always meant to be, the bridge between life and death. Creation and destruction, the god of two worlds. The title felt absurd to Naruto, who had spent his childhood as an outcast, scraping for acknowledgement. I'm just Naruto, he protested. You have never been just anything, Arceus said, a hint of warmth in its voice. Now, we must act quickly. The convergence accelerates. What must I do? First, survive, Arceus answered plainly. Your body transforms to accommodate power no mortal was meant to wield. Then, learn to control abilities beyond imagination. And finally, Giratina added with a hiss. Decide which world lives and which dies, for both cannot continue to exist in the same dimensional space. Naruto's eyes widened in horror. I won't choose between worlds. There has to be another way. Perhaps, Arceus conceded, but finding it will require power and wisdom in equal measure. Another violent tremor shook the distortion world. One of the larger rifts expanded, showing a clear view of the Pokémon world, specifically, ancient stone columns atop a mist-shrouded mountain. A human figure stood there, blonde hair whipping in unnatural winds as she stared up at the distortion in her own sky. Cynthia senses the disruption, Arceus noted. The champion's intuition serves her well. Champion? Naruto questioned. One of the strongest human trainers in that world, Arceus explained. A protector, not unlike your cage. The rift widened further, and Naruto felt himself drawn toward it. Not the violent suction of before, but a gentle pull, as though that reality recognized something in him and called to it. It seems your journey continues there, Arceus observed. The threads of fate guide you to those who will help you understand your new existence. But my own world will remain connected through you, Arceus assured him. As your power grows, you will learn to move between realms at will. For now, follow the path laid before you. I will be watching, Godeling, Giratina warned, its massive form retreating into the shadows. Prove worthy of your heritage, or I shall personally ensure your destruction. With that ominous promise, the dragon of Antime, Adder vanished into the darkness of its domain. Arceus approached Naruto, lowering its head until their eyes met. Trust in yourself, child of two gods. The compassion that defined your human life will serve you well in divinity. Naruto nodded, still overwhelmed but finding his center in familiar determination. I've never backed down from a challenge, and I'm not starting now. Then go forth, Arceus commanded, its body beginning to glow with intensifying light. And remember, creation and destruction must balance. One cannot exist without the other. The rift before Naruto expanded to engulf him entirely, and he felt himself falling forward into this new reality. The last thing he saw was Arceus, majestic and ancient, watching him with what might have been hope in its ageless eyes. Then he was through, gravity reasserting itself with painful suddenness as he crashed onto cold stone tiles amid the ancient columns of Spear Pillar. Cynthia had spent enough time studying ancient ruins to know when something was fundamentally wrong with reality itself. The air above Spear Pillar shimmered like heat waves over desert sand, colors that had no business in a natural sky bleeding through tears in the firmament. The stone columns of the sacred site vibrated at a frequency just below hearing but felt in bones and teeth, a resonance older than human civilization. This isn't like anything in the records, she murmured to herself, flipping through the ancient text she'd brought from Celestic Town's library. Her grandmother's translations of the oldest myths mentioned disruptions in the fabric of space and time, but nothing that described the phenomenon currently unfolding above Mt. Coronet. Her Garchomp stood sentinel beside her, the dragon Pokémon's sensitive fins evering as it detected disturbances beyond human perception. Its normally aggressive posture had turned defensive, positioning itself between its trainer and the spatial anomaly. What do you sense, old friend? Cynthia asked, placing a reassuring hand on Garchomp's rough hide. The dragon gave a low rumble in response, eyes never leaving the distortion. Celestial events involving legendary Pokémon weren't unprecedented in Sinnoh. Cynthia herself had witnessed Dialga and Palkia's clash years earlier, and the resulting temporal spatial disruptions. But this felt different, more fundamental, as though the very rules governing existence were being rewritten. She unclipped a specialized device from her belt, a prototype from Professor Rowan's lab designed to measure dimensional energy fluctuations. The readings spiked off the scale, the screen flashing warning signals before going dark. Well, that's certainly not good, she observed with the calm that had become her trademark as champion. The distortion above grew more pronounced, the tear widening to reveal glimpses of another place entirely, not ultra-space or the distortion world, which she'd documented in her research, but somewhere new. She caught impressions of forests unlike any in Sinnoh, mountain ranges with distinctly different geological formations, and architecture that combined elements of ancient and modern styles she'd never encountered. Another world entirely, she wondered aloud, her researcher's curiosity momentarily overriding caution. The tear in reality pulsed, expanding rapidly. Garchomp growled, ting a battle stance as energy began to coalesce at the center of the anomaly. Cynthia reached for Lucario's Pokeball, preparing for whatever might emerge. What, or rather, who, fell through the dimensional rift was not what she expected. A young man crashed onto the stone platform, the impact creating a spider web of cracks in the ancient tiles. He wore orange and black clothing of unusual design, with a metal plate bearing an unfamiliar symbol attached to a headband. Most striking were the strange markings on his cheeks, 3 lines on each side that resembled whiskers, and eyes that shifted from blue to a strange golden orange and back again. He groaned, pushing himself to his knees, then froze as he registered Cynthia and Garchomp's presence. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other. Two humans from different realities processing the impossibility of their meeting. Are you okay? Cynthia finally asked, keeping her voice level and calm despite the extraordinary circumstances. The young man blinked at her words, seemingly surprised. You speak my language. An interesting observation, Cynthia thought. Whatever translation effect was occurring, it worked both ways. I'm speaking Sinahan, she replied. But I understand you perfectly as well. He stood slowly, movements betraying a fighter's training in their economic precision. Where am I? Spear pillar, atop MT. Coronet in the Sinnoh region. Seeing his blank expression, she added, a sacred site where the boundaries between dimensions are naturally thinner. Another world, he murmured, looking around with wonder and confusion. His gaze settled on Garchomp, eyes widening. Is that a Pokémon? Yes, this is my partner, Garchomp. Cynthia watched his reaction carefully. I take it you don't have Pokémon where you come from. He shook his head. We have summons and tailed beasts, but nothing like. He gestured at Garchomp, who continued to watch him with suspicious eyes. I'm Cynthia, by the way. Sinnoh region champion and researcher of Pokémon mythology. She offered her hand in the universal gesture of peaceful greeting. After a moment's hesitation, he clasped it. His grip was firm but carefully controlled, as though he was consciously limiting his strength. Naruto Uzumaki, shinobi of the Hidden Leaf Village, and he trailed off, seemingly unsure how to continue. And, Cynthia prompted, noting his discomfort. He ran a hand through spiky blonde hair. Would you believe I just found out I might be part god? Because I'm still processing that myself. Under normal circumstances, Cynthia might have dismissed such a claim as delusion. But standing at Spear Pillar with reality literally tearing open above them, normal circumstances clearly didn't apply. Actually, she replied, in my line of work, divine heritage isn't the strangest thing I've encountered. She nodded toward the rift, which had begun to stabilize into a persistent window between worlds. Though, this certainly ranks in the top 5 unusual events I've witnessed. Naruto followed her gaze upward, his expression growing serious. This is bad, isn't it? Arceus said something about worlds converging that weren't supposed to. Cynthia's breath caught. You've met Arceus, the original one. If you mean a white 4-legged being with a golden wheel thing and the ability to create worlds, then yeah, about 10 minutes ago. He rubbed his chest absently. It told me I'm supposedly carrying some of its power, along with something called the Shinigami from my world. Creation and death, Cynthia whispered. Pieces of ancient myths suddenly clicking into place. The balance point between existence and non-existence. Her eyes widened as she studied him with new understanding. There are legends, fragments really, about a being born of both Arceus and death itself, destined to reset the cosmic cycle when it grew corrupt. Naruto groaned. Great, another prophecy. I've had enough of those to last a lifetime. Before Cynthia could respond, the ground beneath them shook violently. Garchomp steadied her as stone columns swayed precariously. Above them, the rift pulsed with renewed energy. And something began to emerge. Not a person this time, but a wave of pure energy, neither light nor darkness but something else entirely. As it washed over Spear Pillar, reality itself seemed to hiccup. The ancient columns blurred, momentarily overlapping with different structures, massive stone faces carved into a mountainside. The air filled with the scent of forest and distant seas, sensa. Tions from Naruto's world bleeding into Sinnoh. What's happening? Naruto shouted over the growing maelstrom of energies. The dimensions are merging, Cynthia called back, her long blonde hair pping wildly in winds that carried the essence of two worlds. We need to stabilize the convergence point. How do we do that? I don't know. For once, Cynthia's extensive knowledge offered no solutions. This shouldn't be possible. As the chaotic energies intensified, something changed in Naruto. His eyes shifted fully to that golden-orange hue, and an aura of light surrounded him, not the chakra he was familiar with, but something purer, more fundamental. Without conscious thought, he raised his hands toward the rift. Power flowed from him in waves, not destructive like Kurama's chakra had once been, but ordering, arranging, creating structure where there was chaos. The merging energies began to align, finding harmony rather than conflict. Cynthia watched in awe as the young man, who had literally fallen from another world, imposed order on cosmic forces. Her instruments would later confirm what her instincts told her in that moment. She was witnessing the birth of a god. The violent tremors subsided to gentle vibrations. The rift remained, but transformed from a jagged tear to a smooth oval portal through which both worlds could be glimpsed. The overlapping realities separated into distinct regions, no longer threatening to annihilate each other through incompatible physical laws. Naruto lowered his hands, staring at them in disbelief. "Did I just do that?" "You did," Cynthia confirmed, unable to keep the wonder from her voice. "You stabilized a convergence event that should have destroyed both our worlds." He swayed suddenly, exhaustion catching up with him. Cynthia moved forward quickly, catching him before he could collapse. Despite his lean build, he was surprisingly heavy, dense with muscle and something else, an energy that hummed against her skin where they touched. "Sorry," he mumbled, steadying himself with her support. "Guess I'm not used to whatever that was." "Divine creation energy, if the legends are correct," Cynthia said, helping him to sit on a fallen column segment. "And no, I wouldn't imagine anyone would be used to wielding the power that shaped the universe." Garchomp approached cautiously, its previous wariness replaced with something like reverence. It lowered its head in a gesture Cynthia had only seen it make toward Arceus during their one encounter with the alpha Pokémon. Naruto reached out hesitantly to the dragon. "Is it okay if I go ahead?" Cynthia encouraged. "Garchomp doesn't offer respect easily. You've earned it." As Naruto's fingers made contact with Garchomp's rough hide, a spark of golden energy transferred between them. The dragon Pokémon's eyes widened, and it let out a sound of surprise that melted into what could only be described as contentment. "I can feel its life force," Naruto said in wonder. "It's different from chakra, but similar too. Like it's singing." Cynthia nodded. "That's a good way to describe a Pokémon's energy. Each species has its own signature, its own song, as you put it." Above them, the portal continued to stabilize, the edges growing more defined. Through it, Cynthia could see a village built among enormous trees, with that same mountain of carved faces visible in the distance. "Is that your home?" she asked. Naruto looked up, longing clear in his expression. "Konoha, the Hidden Leaf Village," his brow furrowed with sudden concern. "My furry NDS, they'll have no idea what's happening. I need to go back." He stood quickly, then immediately stumbled as fatigue reasserted itself. "You're in no condition to go anywhere right now," Cynthia said firmly, using the authoritative tone that few people in Sinnoh dared argue with. "You've just wielded cosmic energy and bridged 2 dimensions. Even a god needs rest after that." Naruto looked like he wanted to protest, but the logic of her words was undeniable. He sat back down with a frustrated sigh. "You don't understand. I have people who depend on me." "I understand perfectly," Cynthia countered. "As champion, the entire Sinnoh region depends on me. But I also know that rushing in exhausted helps no one." She pulled a device from her pocket, a cross between a phone and a computer that Naruto didn't recognize. "I'm contacting Professor Rowan. He's our foremost expert on Pokémon evolution and energy. If anyone can help us understand what's happening, it's him." She paused, studying Naruto with analytical eyes. "And while we wait, perhaps you can tell me more about this shinobi world of yours." In Konoha, chaos reigned. The tear in reality that had swallowed Naruto had collapsed upon itself, leaving no trace of the village's hero. Sasuke, flung clear by the anomaly, had been recovered by Kakashi's search team, unconscious but alive. Of Naruto, there was no sign. Sakura worked tirelessly in the hospital, treating injuries caused by the unexpected spatial disturbance. Buildings had been damaged when gravity briefly fluctuated, and several shinobi had suffered KRA network disruptions from exposure to the unknown energy. "Any word?" she asked as Shikamaru entered the treatment room where she was bandaging a young Chunon's arm. He shook his head, expression grim. "Nothing. It's like he vanished completely. No chakra signature, no trail, nothing even the Inuzuka clan's dogs can track." Sakura's hands trembled slightly before she steadied them through force of will. "That's impossible. Naruto has the most distinctive chakra signature in the village. He can't just disappear. Troublesome as it is, that's exactly what happened." Shikamaru leaned against the wall, mind racing through scenarios and possibilities. Sasuke regained consciousness briefly. He said the tear wasn't a jutsu, it was something else entirely. What could create something like that? Not even Kagaya's dimensional abilities worked that way. I don't know. The admission clearly frustrated the genius strategist. But whatever it was, it's still affecting the village. He wasn't exaggerating. Throughout Konoha, subtle changes were manifesting. Plants growing in shapes never seen before, small animals exhibiting strange coloration and abilities, the very atmosphere Aka. Shinigami shimmering with unfamiliar energy. In the Hokage's office, Kakashi stood before the window, observing the village with his Sharingan exposed. Even to his copied dojutsu, the energies flowing through Konoha appeared alien, following patterns that defied chakra theory. A knock at the door interrupted his observations. "Enter," he called, not turning from the window. "Lord Hokage." Hinata Hyuga's voice was soft but determined. "I request permission to lead a search for Naruto-kun." Now Kakashi did turn, studying the young woman with a measured gaze. Of all the Konoha 11, Hinata had taken Naruto's disappearance hardest, though she hid it behind the composed facade her clan training provided. "Hinata," he began gently, "we have Anbu teams searching the entire Fire Country. If Naruto is anywhere to be found, he's not in this world anymore," she interrupted, then immediately lowered her eyes. "Forgive my rudeness, Lord Hokage, but I've seen it." Kakashi's visible eyebrow raised. "Explain." "With my Byakugan." Her confidence grew as she spoke. The tear that took Naruto-kun wasn't just spatial manipulation. It connected to somewhere, elsewhere. And there's still a connection, though it's faint. "You can see this connection." She nodded. "It's like a thread of chakra, but not exactly chakra. It stretches from where Naruto-kun disappeared into. I don't know how to describe it. Another layer of reality." Kakashi considered this information carefully. The Hyuga clan's visual prowess sometimes revealed things even the Sharingan missed, particularly involving chakra networks and energy flows. "Show me," he decided. 20 minutes later, they stood at the Valley of the End, the massive statues of Hashirama and Madara still bearing the scars of Naruto and Sasuke's final battle. Hinata activated her Byakugan, veins bulging around her lavender eyes as she scanned the area. "There," she pointed to a spot in midair where the tear had first appeared. "Do you see it?" Kakashi's Sharingan spun as he focused on the location. At first, nothing seemed amiss, but gradually, he perceived it. A hairline fracture in reality itself, pulsing with energy unlike anything in his experience. "It's trying to heal itself," he observed. "The barrier between whatever's on the other side and our world. But it hasn't closed completely," Hinata said, a hint of hope in her voice. "And Naruto-kun's energy signature leads through it. I can follow that trail." Kakashi frowned beneath his mask. "That would be extremely dangerous, Hinata. We have no idea what's on the other side or if you could return." "With respect, Lord Hokage, I don't care about the danger." The steel in her voice would have surprised anyone who didn't know her well. "Naruto-kun never gave up on any of us. I won't give up on him." Before Kakashi could respond, the fracture pulsed visibly, widening just enough that even those without dojutsu could perceive it, a shimmer in the air like heat haze, but geometric and deliberate. Through it came a wave of foreign energy that washed over them like a physical force. Hinata gasped, not in pain but surprise, as her Byakugan showed her glim. PSES of a world beyond, ancient stone columns, a mountain shrouded in mist, and most importantly, a familiar chakra signature. "Naruto-kun," she cried, stepping toward the distortion instinctively. Kakashi caught her arm. "Wait, something's happening." The fracture stabilized, edges smoothing from jagged tear to oval portal. Through it, they could see Spear Pillar with increasing clarity, and sitting on a fallen column. Looking exhausted but very much alive, was Naruto. "He's alive," Hinata whispered, relief making her voice tremble. "And he's changed somehow." She was right. Even from a distance, even through the dimensional barrier, Kakashi could see that Naruto's chakra had transformed. It flowed around him in patterns reminiscent of both Sage Mode and the Nine Tails energy, but with an added dimension that defied categorization. Standing beside him was a woman with long blonde hair and clothing unlike anything in the 5 great nations, and beside her, a creature that bled a land shark with scythe-like appendages. The woman appeared to be speaking into some kind of device while keeping a watchful eye on Naruto. Another world entirely, Kakashi murmured, fascination temporarily overriding concern. Not a pocket dimension or genjutsu construct, but a fully realized reality parallel to our own. Hinata took another step toward the portal. I'm going through. This time, Kakashi didn't stop her. Be careful, establish contact, assess the situation, but don't take unnecessary risks. If Naruto is safe for the moment, focus on gathering information. She nodded, determination hardening her delicate features. With a deep breath, she stepped toward the dimensional opening, only to be repelled by an invisible barrier. The portal allowed visual and energy transfer but prevented physical crossing. I can't get through, she said, frustration evident in her voice. She pressed her palm against the barrier, and on the other side, Naruto suddenly looked up. As though feeling her presence across dimensions. Hinata, his lips formed her name, though no sound crossed the barrier. He sees me, Hinata whispered, hope rekindling. She formed familiar hand signs, channeling chakra to her fingertips, and began to write in the air, letters made of pure chakra that hovered between worlds. Naruto-kun, we're here. Konoha is looking for you. Are you safe? Asterisk. On spear pillar. Naruto jumped to his feet as he spotted the glowing chakra letters appearing in the air near the portal. Cynthia followed his gaze, her conversation with Professor Rowan temporarily forgotten. Someone from your world is communicating, she observed, watching the strange energy shapes with fascination. It's Hinata, Naruto said, a smile breaking across his tired face. She can see across dimensions with her Byakugan. Impressive visual ability, Cynthia noted. Similar to how our Pokémon Gardevoir can perceive emotions across dimensional barriers. Naruto approached the portal, placing his hand where Hinata's appeared to be on the other side. Though a barrier prevented physical contact, he could feel her chakra signature, warm, gentle, yet underlined with the determination that had always impressed him. I need to respond, he said, turning to Cynthia. But I don't know if my chakra will work the same way here. She considered the problem. Try channeling energy like you did when you stabilized the portal. Your power seems to bridge both worlds naturally. Nodding, Naruto focused, drawing not on Kurama's chakra or his own reserves, but the new wellspring of energy Arceus had awakened. Golden light gathered around his fingertips as he wrote in the air. I'm safe. In another world called Sinnoh. Meeting people who can help. Portal stable but can't cross yet. Tell everyone I'm okay. We'll find way home. Asterisk. The letters shimmered with more than just energy. Tiny motes of creative force sparkled within them, reality itself responding to his intent. On the other side, he could see Hinata and Kakashi-sensei reading his message, relief evident in their postures. Hinata's response came quickly. Understood. Village affected by strange energy. New plants, animals changing. Sasuke recovering. I'll find way to reach you. Asterisk. Naruto smiled at her determination. That was the Hinata he knew, quiet but unstoppable when she set her mind to something. He replied, be careful, energy dangerous. Learning about my heritage. Will explain when I see you. I miss you. Asterisk. That last part slipped out naturally, surprising him slightly with its honesty. He chaos following the war and his battle with Sasuke, he hadn't had time to properly address Hinata's confession during Pain's attack or her unwavering support throughout the conflicts. But here, separated by dimensions, the truth of his feelings seemed clearer somehow. On the other side, he saw Hinata's cheeks flush pink as she read his words. Kakashi's eye crinkled in what Naruto recognized as his hidden smile. Her final message was simple but filled with emotion. I believe in you, always have. Find your way back to us. Asterisk. The connection began to fade, the portal's energy stabilizing to a level that no longer supported their improvised communication. The last thing Naruto saw was Hinata's unwavering gaze, filled with a confidence in him that somehow made the impossible task before him seem achievable. As the interaction ended, he turned to find Cynthia watching him with analytical interest. A close friend, she asked, though something in her tone suggested she'd accurately assessed the relationship was more complex. Yeah, Naruto replied, rubbing the back of his neck. Hinata's special. She's always believed in me, even when no one else did. Cynthia nodded, understanding in her gray eyes. Those connections are precious. I can see why you're determined to find a way back. She gestured to the stabilized portal. Though it appears the worlds are determined to maintain some form of connection regardless. Quote, Arceus said I'm supposed to be some kind of bridge between worlds. Naruto shook his head, still processing the revelation. I've been called a lot of things. Demon brat, knucklehead ninja. Child of prophecy, but god of creation and death, is definitely new. If it helps, Cynthia offered with a small smile, in my experience, those who seek godhood are rarely worthy of it, while those who have it thrust upon them often rise to the occasion. The wind changed suddenly, carrying a chill that hadn't been present before. Garchomp growled, Finn's detectee. A disturbance beyond human perception. Cynthia tensed, her hand moving to her Pokeballs. Something's coming, she warned. Naruto felt it too, a presence that slithered at the edges of awareness, neither alive nor dead, but hungry in a way that transcended physical need. It reminded him of the sensation he'd experienced briefly in the distortion world, but darker, more insidious. It feels like, he began, trying to articulate the alien sensation. Absence, Cynthia finished for him. The void between stars, the silence between heartbeats. The air several meters away began to darken. Not with shadow but with the absence of light, a perfect circle of nothing that expanded slowly, deliberately. The stone beneath it grayed and crumbled to dust, life force itself being drawn into the anomaly. What is that? Naruto asked, instinctively moving into a defensive stance. I don't know, Cynthia admitted, her usual confidence tinged with genuine concern. But whatever it is, it's summing the life energy of everything it touches. As if responding to her assessment, the void pulsed, sending out a wave of anti-energy that withered the sparse vegetation growing between the stone tiles. Garchomp intercepted the wave with a dragon claw attack, the draconic energy temporarily disrupting the void's expansion. Good thinking, Cynthia praised her partner. Energy attacks might counteract it. Naruto formed his signature hand sign. Shadow Clone Jutsu. A dozen copies of himself appeared in puffs of smoke, surrounding the anomaly at safe distances. One clone charged forward with a Rasengan, the spiraling chakra sphere meeting the edge of the void, only to have its rotation slow, energy draining into nothingness. The clone dispersed as the backlash hit it. Physical attacks won't work, Naruto called out. It absorbs chakra. Try your creation energy, Cynthia suggested, directing Garchomp to prepare a Draco Meteor as backup. If this thing represents absence, perhaps presence is its natural counter. Naruto nodded, centering himself and reaching for that new wellspring of power. Unlike chakra, which required specific hand signs and mental focus, this energy responded directly to his intent. Golden light gathered around his hands, tiny motes of creative force spinning like miniature galaxies between his fingers. He thrust his palms forward, directing a concentrated beam of pure creation energy at the void. Where they met, reality itself seemed to ripple, the fundamental forces of existence clashing in visual display of light versus darkness, being versus non-being. The void contracted slightly, as though injured by the contact. A sound emerged from it, not audio in the conventional sense, but the concept of a scream translated into sensory input. It retreated, the perfect circle collapsing in on itself until nothing remained but a small patch of withered stone. You did it, Cynthia said, genuine admiration in her voice. Naruto stared at his hands, where the golden energy still flickered between his fingers like living light. I don't think I destroyed it. It retreated. Agreed. Cynthia approached the affected area cautiously, studying the damage. Whatever that entity was, it was testing defenses, probing for weaknesses. You sound like you've dealt with this kind of thing before. She smiled grimly. When you've faced as many legendary Pokémon and world-ending threats as I have, you develop an instinct for distinguishing between random anomalies and deliberate attacks. Naruto's remaining clones dispelled, returning their experiences to his consciousness. That thing, it felt familiar somehow. Like I've encountered it before, but can't remember where. Perhaps part of your divine heritage recognizes it, Cynthia suggested. If you truly carry the essence of both creation and death, you may be naturally attuned to forces that threaten the cosmic balance. The portal connecting the worlds pulsed, responding to the recent energy discharge. Through it, They could see Konoha more clearly, and more concerning, patches of void similar to what they'd just confronted appearing throughout the village. It's affecting my world too, Naruto realized with growing alarm. Whatever this thing is, it's attacking both dimensions. Cynthia's expression hardened into the focused determination that had made her Sinnoh's most formidable champion. Then we need to understand it before it grows stronger. She checked her device. Professor Rowan will meet us in Celestic Town. It's safer than remaining exposed here. My grandmother's archives contain the region's most comprehensive records on dimensional phenomena. Naruto nodded, casting one last look at the portal showing his homeworld. Will this connection remain stable? It seems to be anchored to you personally, Cynthia observed. As long as you exist in both worlds simultaneously, physically here but connected to your origin point, the bridge should remain. Simultaneously, Naruto mused, an idea forming. He created another shadow clone, but instead of regular chakra, he infused it with the golden creation energy. The clone shimmered with internal light, more solid and substantial than his usual duplicates. What are you doing? Cynthia asked, watching with scholarly interest. Testing a theory. Naruto directed the special clone toward the portal. Unlike Hinata's earlier attempt to cross, the clone met no resistance, passing through the dimensional barrier as though it weren't there. On the other side, Kakashi and Hinata stare, in shock as the glowing duplicate of Naruto materialized before them. A part of me that's part of both worlds, Naruto explained to Cynthia. My shadow clones share consciousness with me, whatever they experience. I remember when they disperse. This way, I can be in two places at once. Impressive problem solving, Cynthia acknowledged. Your adaptability matches your power. Through the portal, they watched as the enhanced clone explained the situation to Kakashi and Hinata. The Hokage nodded seriously while Hinata activated her Byakugan, studying the clone's unique energy signature. We should go, Cynthia said. Checking the darkening sky, weather patterns suggest another dimensional disturbance approaching. I'd rather not be exposed on a mountaintop when it hits. As if to emphasize her point. Lightning that wasn't quite lightning, tinged purple and moving in impossible patterns, began to fork across the clouds above Mt. Coronet. Naruto took one last look at the portal, his clone was now organizing defense measures against the void entities appearing in Konoha. Hinata stood at its side, her gentle fist techniques proving surprisingly effective against the anomalies. They'll be okay, he told himself as much as Cynthia. Konoha has survived worse, and now they have a piece of you to help them, she reminded him, releasing another Pokeball. A majestic Togekiss emerged, spreading its wings in preparation for flight. This is our transportation to Celestic Town. Naruto stared at the creature in wonder. It's like nothing I've ever seen. And I suspect, your shinobi abilities would appear equally miraculous to most Pokémon trainers, Cynthia replied with a small smile. Our worlds have developed different but equally extraordinary paths. As they mounted Togekiss, Cynthia with the practiced ease of experience, Naruto with cautious wonder, the Sinnoh champion gazed at the young man who had literally fallen from another reality into hers. His power was undeniable, his divine heritage increasingly evident in the golden light that occasionally flickered across his skin, and yet what impressed her most was his fundamentally human concern for others. Perhaps, she thought, that was the most important quality for one destined to balance creation and destruction, a heart that understood the value of what it protected. Togekiss rose into the air, carrying them away from Spear Pillar just as another tremor shook the ancient site. Behind them, the portal remained, a window between worlds that neither could afford to close. In the void between dimensions, something ancient and patient watched their departure. It had tested the new god's defenses and found them stronger than anticipated. But time was on its side, it had existed before creation itself and could wait for the perfect moment to strike. The void entity retreated deeper into the spaces between realities, gathering strength for the true battle to come. Chapter 1 End Chapter 2, Legacy of Two Gods. Dawn broke over Celestic Town in shimmering waves of amber and gold, illuminating the ancient buildings with light that seemed to linger on the carved stone patterns adorning their walls. Unlike the larger cities of Sinnoh with their modern architecture, Celestic Town existed in a curious state of temporal suspension, a community that had preserved its connection to the region's oldest myths and customs. Naruto stood at the window of Cynthia's family home, watching as the town awakened. Smoke curled from chimneys, and early risers emerged to tend gardens flourishing with plants he'd never seen before. Everything here felt both alien and strangely familiar, as though part of him recognized this world despite never having walked its soil before yesterday. Couldn't sleep. Cynthia's voice came from behind him, measured and calm as always. He turned to find the Sinnoh champion already dressed in her characteristic black outfit, her long blonde hair falling in perfect waves around a face that combined scholarly intelligence with battle-hardened strength. In the short time he'd known her, Naruto had quickly understood why she was respected throughout her world. She carried herself with an authority that never needed to announce itself. "It's weird," Naruto replied, his voice low to avoid waking Professor Rowan, who was still asleep in the guest room. "I don't feel tired exactly. It's more like, my body doesn't know if it needs rest anymore." Cynthia approached, analytical gray eyes studying him with the precision of a researcher observing a rare phenomenon. "Your physiological state is changing. Professor Rowan's readings yesterday showed your cellular structure incorporating elements that don't correspond to any known Pokémon or human pattern." "Great," Naruto muttered, "so I'm not even human anymore." "I didn't say that," Cynthia corrected gently. "You're becoming something more complex. Something that encompasses humanity rather than abandons it." She gestured to the kitchen. "Tea. My grandmother always says thinking happens better over a hot drink." Naruto nodded, following her through the home that somehow managed to feel both ancient and comfortable. Bookshelves lined every wall, filled with volumes whose spines bore titles in languages he couldn't read. Artifacts that might have belonged in a museum were displayed casually, a stone tablet here, a ceremonial mask there. It reminded him somehow of the Hokage's office, where the weight of history coexisted with daily practicality. "Your family has lived here a long time," he observed as Cynthia expertly prepared a tea blend he didn't recognize. "For as long as there's been a Celestic town," she confirmed, heating water with practiced movements. "My grandmother is the rent keeper of our region's oldest legends. Her knowledge of Sinnoh mythology is unparalleled, which is why I brought you here." She handed him a steaming cup, its contents emitting an aroma both floral and earthy. "This might help center you. It's made from herbs that grow only on Mt. Coronet, where the boundary between dimensions is naturally thinner." Naruto sipped cautiously, surprised by the pleasant warmth that spread through him, not just physical heat, but something that seemed to organize his scattered thoughts. "This is good. Nothing like the teas we have in Konoha. Different worlds, different plants," Cynthia said with a slight smile, taking a seat across from him at the kitchen table. "Though from what you've told me about chakra and our understanding of Pokémon energy, there may be more similarities between our realities than differences." Before Naruto could respond, a subtle tremor shook the house, not violent enough to knock anything over, but noticeable in the way the tea rippled in their cups. It was the fifth such tremor since their arrival in Celestic Town the previous evening. "Another convergence ripple," Cynthia noted, glancing at a device on the kitchen counter that flashed with data. The dimensional boundaries continue to thin. Naruto felt the disturbance differently than she did, not as physical movement, but as a shift in something more fundamental. For a brief moment, he perceived both Celestic Town and Konoha simultaneously, his consciousness straddling the divide between worlds. "It's getting worse," he said, pressing his palm against his temple. "I can feel the walls between our worlds stretching thinner, like tissue paper being pulled apart." Cynthia studied him with renewed interest. "You're perceiving the dimensional shifts directly. That's consistent with your heritage, if you truly carry Arceus's essence." Naruto set his cup down perhaps more forcefully than he intended. "That's another thing. This whole son of two gods business. It doesn't make sense. I know who my parents were, Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki. I've met them, talked with them, even if they're gone now." Cynthia didn't flinch at his frustration, her expression remaining thoughtful. "Perhaps it's not as contradictory as it seems. In our mythology, Arceus often works through avatars or vessels. It's entirely possible your human parents were Asen specifically to bring something divine into physical form. But why? And why me?" Before Cynthia could respond, the air in the center of the kitchen shimmered and distorted. Naruto jumped to his feet instinctively. hands moving toward his weapons pouch, while Cynthia reached for the Pokeballs at her belt. Neither completed their defensive movements as recognition dawned. It wasn't an attack, it was a dimensional rift, smaller and more controlled than the one that had brought Naruto to this world, but unmistakable in its pulsing energy signature. Through it, they could see the familiar stone structures of the Valley of the End. And stepping through, expression determined but movements hesitant, was Hinata Hyuga. Naruto-kun. Her voice carried equal parts relief and disbelief as she fully materialized in the kitchen. The rift closing behind her with a soft whisper of displaced air. Hinata. Naruto stared in shock. How did you? He didn't finish the question as she crossed the distance between them in 3 quick steps and embraced him tightly. For a moment, Naruto froze in surprise before his arms wrapped around her smaller frame, the familiar scent of her hair, lavender. And something uniquely Hinata, grounding him in a way nothing else had since his arrival in this strange world. I found you, she whispered against his chest. The connection led me here. Cynthia observed their reunion with quiet interest, noting the obvious bond between them. You must be Hinata, she said after giving them a moment. Naruto mentioned you. Hinata stepped back from the embrace, a faint blush coloring her cheeks as she turned to acknowledge Cynthia with the formal bow of a Hyuga. Thank you for helping Naruto-kun. I am Hinata Hyuga of the Hidden Leaf Village. Cynthia of Celestic Town, Sinnoh champion. Cynthia returned the gesture with her own subtle nod. Though I suspect formal introductions are the least of our concerns right now. She gestured to where the dimensional rift had been. That was an impressive feat of interdimensional travel. How did you manage it? Hinata's pale eyes, with their barely perceptible lavender tint, shifted toward Naruto. Load the thread that connects Naruto-kun to our world. My Byakugan can see it, like a cord of pure chakra, but different somehow. More substantial. The Byakugan is her clan's visual ability, Naruto explained to Cynthia. It can see chakra networks, through solid objects, nearly 360 degrees around her body, and apparently across dimensions too. Fascinating, Cynthia murmured, her research. Hers mind clearly cataloging this information. Similar to how certain psychic-type Pokémon can perceive energy flows invisible to the human eye. Hinata studied their surroundings, her expression betraying only subtle hints of the wonder she must have felt at finding herself in another world entirely. Her gaze lingered on the artifacts lining the walls, the unfamiliar script in the books, before returning to Naruto, and widening in shock. Naruto-kun, your chakra network. She activated her Byakugan without hand signs, veins bulging around her eyes as she studied him with her enhanced vision. It's completely transformed. What do you see? Cynthia asked, unable to hide her scholarly curiosity. Hinata's gaze traced patterns only she could perceive. Normal chakra networks have 361 tenketsu points connected by channels that follow the body's meridians. Naruto-kun's has expanded. New pathways overlaying the original network, connecting to points that shouldn't exist. Her voice took on a tone of wonder. And the energy flowing through them isn't chakra, at least not entirely. It's more foundational somehow. Creation energy, Cynthia suggested. The fundamental force Arceus used to shape our world. According to the myths, Hinata deactivated her Byakugan, turning to Cynthia. Who is Arceus? And what's happened to Naruto-kun? The three moved to the main sitting room, where Naruto and Cynthia took turns explaining what they knew, the dimensional convergence, Naruto's encounter with Arceus and Giratina in the distortion world, and the revelation of his apparent divine heritage. Hinata listened intently, asking occasional precise questions that reflected her analytical mind often hidden behind her quiet demeanor. So you're saying Naruto-kun is? Hinata hesitated, as though the concept were too immense to voice. The child of creation and death, Cynthia finished. Born from the union of Arceus, the being who shaped our universe, and your world's death deity, the Shinigami. But my parents, Naruto began. Were likely vessels, said a new voice from the doorway. Professor Rowan stood there, his imposing figure softened somewhat by sleep rumpled clothing but his eyes sharp with the intensity that had made him Sinnoh's preeminent Pokémon researcher. Arcane energies often require physical anchors in the material world. Your human parents provided the physical form, while these cosmic entities contributed the essence. He entered fully, nodding acknowledgement to Hinata before continuing. I've been analyzing the data from the equipment I set up last night. The dimensional fluctuations follow a pattern consistent with what we observed during the Creation Trio incident years ago, but on a more fundamental level. Creation Trio? Hinata questioned. Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina, Cynthia explained. The legendary Pokémon who govern time, space, and antimatter respectively. They were born directly from Arceus at the dawn of creation to help shape and maintain reality. Like the Sage of Six Paths creating Ninshu, Hinata murmured, drawing parallels to her own world's mythology. Professor Rowan stroked his impressive mustache thoughtfully. What's particularly interesting is the resonance pattern between the dimensional rifts and your energy signature, young man. He gestured to Naruto. Your functioning is both a catalyst and an anchor for the convergence event. In simple terms, reality is reshaping itself around you. Another tremor shook the house, stronger than the previous ones. Outside, the morning sky darkened. Momentarily, as though a shadow had passed over the sun. The temperature dropped several degrees before gradually returning to normal. The frequency increases, Rowan noted grimly, checking his instruments. We're approaching what I theorize is a critical threshold of dimensional stability. In other words, Naruto translated, if we don't figure this out soon, both worlds could be destroyed. Or worse, merged improperly. Creating a hybrid reality where neither world's natural laws function correctly, Cynthia added. We need more information. Hinata, who had been quiet for several moments, suddenly spoke. I think I might know someone who could help. 3 pairs of eyes turned to her. If Naruto-kun is truly connected to the Shinigami, then perhaps the answers lie partially in our world. With those who understand death. You're thinking of the Uzumaki clan's masked temple, Naruto realized, recalling the ancient shrine where his mother's clan had once communed with the death god. Hinata nodded. Kakashi-sensei. I mean, Lord Sixth, dispatched teams to investigate it after your disappearance. They reported unusual activity there, ancient seals activating on their own. A response to the awakening of Naruto's divine heritage, perhaps, Professor Rowan mused. But that still leaves the question of Arceus's involvement. Then we need to speak with both sources directly, Cynthia said decisively. The champion's authority evident in her tone. The Shinigami from your world, and Arceus from ours. Naruto laughed, though the sound carried little humor. Right, just casually summon 2 gods for a chat. Should we invite them for tea while we're at it? Actually, Cynthia replied, completely serious, there is a way to commune with Arceus. The azure flute. The what now? An ancient instrument said to awaken Arceus when played at the peak of Mt. Coronet, she explained. It was believed lost to time, but my grandmother's research suggests it was actually divided into pieces and hidden throughout Sinnoh to prevent misuse. And the Shinigami can be called through specific Uzumaki sealing techniques, Hinata added. Though the cost is usually the summoner's soul. Naruto shook his head firmly. No one's sacrificing their soul. There has to be another way. As if in response to his declaration, a new presence made itself known, not through sight or sound, but through the sudden coldness that permeated the room, a chill that seeped into bones and breath. The 4 occupants found themselves unable to move as reality itself seemed to thin around them. From this attenuation of the physical world stepped a figure that defied proper description. Vaguely humanoid but constantly shifting, with horns that might have been ceremonial or might have been bone. Skin that flickered between corpse pale and dark as the void, and eyes that contained neither pupil nor iris, just endless, hungry darkness. In one skeletal hand, it held a ceremonial knife, in the other, prayer beads that clinked with the finality of a tomb door closing. The Shinigami had answered Naruto's call without being summoned. Child of my essence, it spoke, voice resonating N.O.T. through air but directly in their minds, each word carrying the weight of countless final breaths. You seek answers I am not obliged to give. Despite the overwhelming presence, Naruto found he see. Old move while the others remained frozen in time. He stood, facing the death god without flinching. I deserve to know the truth. What am I? Why was I born? The Shinigami's lipless mouth curved in. What might have been amusement or might have been hunger? Always demanding, like your mother. Kushina's spirit was particularly flavorful. Anger flashed through Naruto. Don't talk about her like that. Why not? Her soul resides within me still, along with your father's and all those claimed by the Reaper Death's seal. The entity drifted closer, including part of yourself. That gave Naruto pause. What do you mean? The fragment of the 9 tails your father sealed within himself. When I claimed Minato Namikaze's soul, I also took that portion of the fox's chakra, which has always been rightfully yours. The Shinigami extended one skeletal hand. It was the first piece of your inheritance. Would you claim it now? Naruto hesitated, suspicion warring with desire. Having Kurama's full power restored would certainly help in the challenges ahead, but dealing with death gods was never straightforward. What's the price? He asked, having learned caution through hard experience. The Shinigami's eternal smile widened fractionally. Wisdom unexpected. The price is already paid, child of 2 worlds. Your very existence is both payment and purpose. That doesn't answer anything. Why did you and Arceus create me? What am I supposed to do? Balance, the death god replied simply. Creation unchecked leads to chaos. Life without purpose, existence without meaning. Death without renewal leads to emptiness, the void that hungers at the edge of all things. Comprehension began to dawn. The void entity that attacked us at Spear Pillar. As neither my creation nor Arceus's. But the absence that existed before either of us. The Shinigami's form seemed to solidify slightly, becoming more distinctly humanoid. It is not alive to be killed, nor dead to be revived. It simply is not, yet seeks to ensure nothing else is either. And I'm supposed to fight this thing. How? By becoming what you were born to be. The Shinigami gestured to the frozen forms of Hinata, Cynthia, and Professor Rowan. These mortals seek to help you, each for their own reasons. The Hyuga girl loves you with the pure devotion only humans can muster. The champion seeks knowledge and protection for her world. The scholar pursues understanding of forces beyond comprehension. The death god's hand moved toward Naruto's chest. Within you lies the potential to be more than either of your parents. Neither solely creation nor exclusively death, but the perfect synthesis that maintains cosmic equilibrium. Naruto stood his ground as the spectral hand passed through his physical form. Cold as the grave yet somehow familiar. He felt something shift within him, not painful but transformative, as though pieces long separated were finally rejoining. I have returned what was always yours, the Shinigami intoned. The full essence of the 9 tails, purified by its passage through the realm of death. Use it wisely, God of Balance. The title still felt wrong to Naruto, too grandiose for the orphan who had grown up craving simple acknowledgement. I never asked for this. Few who deserve power ever do, the Shinigami replied, already beginning to fade. Seek Arceus at the place where time began. Only together will you understand the full purpose of your creation. As the death god's form dissipated like morning mist, one final message echoed in Naruto's mind alone. Why? Our human heart remains your greatest strength, Naruto Uzumaki. Do not lose it in the pursuit of divinity. Reality snapped back into focus. Hinata, Cynthia, and Professor Rowan unfroze, blinking in confusion as though no time had passed for them. What just happened? Cynthia asked, her usual composure slightly shaken. There was a presence. The Shinigami, Naruto confirmed, feeling the found power settling within him. Kurama's complete essence, but somehow transformed. Not just chakra anymore, but something deeper. It came to return something that belonged to me. Hinata activated her Byakugan, then gasped. Naruto-kun, your energy network, it's complete now. The patterns make sense. They're forming a structure I've never seen before, but it's perfect in its complexity. Professor Rowan's instruments began beeping urgently. Extraordinary energy readings, he muttered, adjusting dials. Unlike anything I've recorded before, even from legendary Pokémon. Cynthia watched Naruto carefully. What did it tell you? Quote, that I need to meet with Arceus, at the place where time began, Naruto repeated. Any idea what that means? Recognition flashed in Cynthia's eyes. The time-space altar, a hidden shrine deep within Mt. Coronet, predating even the Spear Pillar. According to legend, it marks the exact point where Arceus first manifested in our world. Can you take me there? I can guide you close. But the final approach, she hesitated. The legends say only those carrying Arceus's blessing can perceive the true path. Which apparently I do, Naruto said, still processing the implications. What about the azure flute you mentioned? We should still seek its pieces, Cynthia advised. The flute may be necessary to fully awaken Arceus, even for one with your connection. Hinata, who had been contemplating silently, spoke up. Naruto-kun, the Shinigami appeared without a summoning ritual. That suggests the boundaries between life and death are weak. Ning along with the dimensional barriers. She's right, Professor Rowan agreed gravely. If fundamental cosmic forces like life and death are destabilizing, we face far greater dangers than just geographical distortions between worlds. As if to emphasize his point, another tremor shook the house, the strongest yet. Outside, alarmed shouts rose from the villagers as the morning sky split with fracture lines like cracks in glass. Through them, glimpses of Konoha's night sky showed stars in constellations no one in Sinnoh had ever seen. We need to move quickly, Cynthia decided, already gathering essentials into a travel pack. Grandmother's archives contain maps to the suspected locations of the azure flute fragments. We should. She was interrupted by an urgent knocking at the front door. Professor Rowan answered it to find a young trainer, breathless and wide-eyed with alarm. Champion Cynthia, the boy gasped. There are strange people at the Celestic ruins. They're performing some kind of ritual. And Pokémon are acting weird all over town. Cynthia's expression hardened into the focused determination of Sinnoh's protector. Describe these people, wearing purple robes with weird symbols, like broken circles. They've got this machine, it's making the cave paintings glow. Naruto and Hinata exchanged glances, both recognizing the tactical implications. A distraction, Hinata suggested quietly, or an opportunity, Naruto countered. If they're messing with ancient sites, they might know something about what's happening. Cynthia was already moving toward the door. The Celestic ruins contain some of the oldest depictions of Dialga and Palkia in existence. If someone's activating them somehow. She left the ominous possibility unfinished. We'll come with you, Naruto decided. Hinata nodding in agreement beside him. I'll continue monitoring the dimensional fluctuations from here, Professor Rowan offered. And see what I can find in Carolina's archives about the time-space altar. Outside, Celestic Town had transformed from peaceful mourning to barely contained chaos. Pokémon roamed the streets in states of agitation, small bird-like creature. Cynthia identified as starly circled in confused patterns, while rodent-type Pokémon called Bidoof huddled in frightened groups. Most concerning were the dimensional fractures visible in the sky, showing glimpses of Konoha and other unrecognizable realms. This way, Cynthia directed, leading them through the disturbed town toward a cave entrance set into the hillside. Even from a distance, EY could see unnatural purple light spilling from the opening. As they approached, the source of the disturbance became clear. A group of 7 robed figures had established a perimeter around the cave entrance. While 2 more operated what looked like a cross between a scientific instrument and a ceremonial altar inside. The device emitted pulsing waves of energy that caused the ancient paintings on the cave walls to glow with responsive light. The distortion cult, Cynthia identified them, voice tight with controlled anger. Worshippers of chaos who believe Giratina should rule over Arceus's creation. Not just believe, champion, called one of the robed figures, turning to face them. We know the truth, that order is an illusion, and distortion the natural state of all existence. Speaker lowered their hood to reveal a woman with striking violet eyes and hair so black it seemed to absorb light. How fitting that you bring the catalyst directly to us. Her gaze fixed on Naruto with unsettling intensity. We felt your arrival tear through the dimensions, Godeling. Our Lord Giratina has spoken of you. Naruto stepped forward, unimpressed by the theatrical display. If you're taking orders from Giratina, you should know it wasn't exactly thrilled about me being here either. The woman smiled, the expression never reaching her eyes. Our Lord's relationship with Arceus's champion is complicated. But your presence accelerates what was already inevitable. And what's that? Cynthia demanded, her hand moving to her Pokeballs. The great unraveling. The cultist gestured to the device, which had begun emitting higher-pitched tones. For too long, reality has been constrained by artificial boundaries, between dimensions, between life and death, between what is and what could be. We simply help it remember its natural state of glorious chaos. Hinata, who had been scanning the area with her Byakugan, spoke urgently. Naruto-kun, Cynthia-san, that device is reading a resonance pattern with the cave paintings. It's weakening the dimensional barriers intentionally. Smart girl, the cultist acknowledged with a nod. The ancient people who created these mages understood more than their descendants. They didn't just depict the legendary Pokémon, they created focus points to channel their energy. Enough talk, Naruto decided, forming his signature hand sign. Shadow Clone Jutsu. A dozen duplicates appeared in puffs of smoke, surrounding the cultists. Several of the robed figures stepped back in alarm, clearly unfamiliar with shinobi techniques. But their leader merely looked intrigued. Fascinating, she murmured. The legends didn't mention this ability. There's a lot the legends don't cover, Naruto replied as his clones moved to engage the outer ring of cultists. Hinata, quote, no further communication was needed. Years of training together allowed them to synchronize perfectly, Naruto's clones creating openings that Hinata exploited with precision gentle fist strikes. Disabling 3 cultists in rapid succession without causing permanent harm. Cynthia, not to be outdone, released her Garchomp with a practiced flick of her wrist. Garchomp, Dragon Claw on that device. Quote, the dragon Pokémon roared acknowledgement, moving with astonishing speed for something so large. 2 cultists moved to intercept with their own Pokémon, a Hove. Ring metallic creature Naruto didn't recognize and something that resembled a ghost composed of shadows and malice. Bronzong and Dusknoir, Cynthia identified them tensely. Both powerful Pokémon with resistance to dragon-type moves. The cultist leader smiled coldly. We came prepared for Sinnoh's champion. What she wasn't prepared for, however, was Hinata. 8 trigrams. Air palm. The Hyuga heiress thrust her palm forward, sending a compressed wave of chakra that struck Bronzong directly. The metallic Pokémon, unaccustomed to attacks that bypassed its physical defenses and struck its energy core directly, let out a discordant chime of pain and toppled from the air. The momentary distraction was enough. 3 of Naruto's clones broke through, reaching the device and immediately beginning to dismantle it with more enthusiasm than technical knowledge. No. The cult leader shouted, genuine alarm replacing confidence. You don't understand what you're interfering with. We understand enough, Cynthia countered, directing Garchomp in a battle against Dusknoir that demonstrated why she was considered Sinnoh's most powerful trainer. You're deliberately destabilizing diamonds. Ional boundaries for some twisted ideology. Not ideology, necessity. The woman's composure cracked further as Naruto's clones successfully dismantled a key component of the device, causing its purple glow to flicker. The boundaries weaken regardless. We merely control the process instead of allowing random collapse. Naruto, listening while his clones continued their work, felt the ring of partial truth in her words. What do you mean, weaken regardless? The cult leader's violet eyes fixed on him with desperate intensity. You feel it too, don't you? The thinning of the veils, the calling of the void. It happens every cosmic cycle. Reality phrase, worlds bleed together, until nothing remains but primal chaos from which new order eventually emerges. Another tremor shook the cave, this one accompanied by a sound like reality itself groaning under pressure. The device, despite being partially dismantled, pulsed with renewed energy, not from its own power source, but responding to something external. It's beginning. The woman whispered, something like religious ecstasy in her expression. The resonance cascade. The cave paintings began to glow with internal light that had nothing to do with the cultists' machine. The ancient depictions of Dialga and Palkia seemed to move subtly, as though the legendary Pokémon were stirring from slumber within their 2-dimensional prison. Everyone out, Cynthia ordered, recognizing the signs of imminent dimensional disturbance. The paintings are activating on their own. They retreated from the cave, dragging the cultists with them, some unconscious from Hinata's precise strikes, others struggling against Naruto's clones. The cult leader, however, broke free and rushed back toward the device. The great unraveling waits for no one, she cried, reconnecting components with frantic movements. I will witness the birth of new chaos. Naruto cursed and moved to stop her, but before he could reach the cave entrance, a blinding flash of light erupted from within. When it faded, the entrance remained, but through it was no longer the interior of a cave. Instead, They saw a vast landscape of floating islands and inverted waterfalls, bathed in purple light. The distortion world had partially merged with their reality. The cult leader stood at the threshold between worlds, her silhouette black against the otherworldly light. "He comes," she announced, voice trembling with fervor. "The Lord of Antimatter answers our call." From the depths of the distortion world visible through the cave entrance, a familiar serpentine form emerged, Giratina. Its red eyes gleaming with ancient power and something that might have been amusement or might have been rage. It paused at the boundary, studying the gathered humans with particular attention to Naruto. "The Godeling progresses faster than anticipated," it observed, voice echoing strangely through the dimensional gateway. "Yet understanding still eludes you. Lord Giratina." The cult leader prostrated herself. "We have prepared the way as instructed." Instructed? Cynthia's sharp gaze shifted between the dragon and the cultist. "You're working directly with Giratina." The antimatter dragon made a sound that might have been laughter. "These mortals serve their purpose, as do you, champion. All play their roles in the coming realignment." "What realignment?" Naruto demanded, stepping forward. "What's really happening to our worlds?" Giratina's massive head tilted, studying him with newfound interest. "The Shinigami has returned what was taken." "Good. Yo. You will need completed power for what comes." Hinata moved to Naruto's side, her Byakugan active as she studied the legendary Pokémon with her unique perception. "This creature, it's not fully present in our dimension. Part of it exists somewhere else entirely." "Perceptive, Hyuga child." Giratina's form rippled, becoming momentarily more substantial before fading back to its semi-transparent state. "Like the Godeling, I exist between states, neither fully of this world nor completely separate from it." "You didn't answer my question," Naruto pressed, undeterred by the dragon's intimidating presence. "What realignment are you talking about?" Instead of answering directly, Giratina turned its attention to the cult leader still prostrated before it. "You have served well, Vera. The Resina NCE points are established throughout the region." "Yes, my lord," the woman, Vera, confirmed without rising. "Eterna, Hearthome, Canalive, Snowpoint, all the ancient sites are prepared." "Good. The pattern must be complete before the conjunction." Cynthia stepped forward, her authoritative presence drawing even Giratina's attention. "Whatever you're planning threatens both our worlds. As Sinnoh's champion and protector, I can't allow it to continue." Giratina's red eyes narrowed. "You understand nothing, champion. This is not destruction but necessary renewal. Ask your new divine friend, he senses the truth, even if he doesn't yet comprehend it." All eyes turned to Naruto, who had gone very still. Within him, the newly completed essence of Kurama stirred with ancient recognition. "Something's wrong with reality itself," he said slowly, putting words to the sensation he'd been feeling since arriving in this world. "It's not just the barriers between dimensions weakening, it's the fabric of existence is wearing thin. Fraying at the edges." "Precisely," Giratina confirmed, something like respect entering its tone. "The cosmic cycle reaches its end phase. What Arceus Ted must periodically be unmade and rewoven. It is the way of all things." "And the void entity?" Naruto asked, remembering the formless hunger they'd encountered at Spear Pillar. "Is that part of this cycle, too?" At the mention of the void entity, even Giratina's imposing presence seemed to dim slightly. "That aberration is neither part of creation nor antimatter. It is the nothingness that existed before existence, and seeks to return all to that state permanently. So it's not working with you." "It works with no one," Giratina replied coldly. "It simply is not, and wishes all else to join it in non-being." "Then why weaken the barriers?" Hinata asked, her analytical mind finding the logical flaw. "If dimensional collapse allows this entity easier access to our worlds." "Because controlled unraveling allows for rebirth," Vera interrupted, finally rising from her prostration. "The cycle must complete, but with guidance rather than random destruction." "She speaks partial truth," Giratina acknowledged. Though her understanding is limited by mortal perspective. The dragon's form began to change, shrinking and reshaping itself until it stood before them in humanoid form, a tall, elegant woman with flowing gray-black hair streaked with red, dressed in armor-like plates reminiscent of Giratina's original appearance. Her eyes remained the same haunting red, and 6 streamers of shadow flowed from her back like phantom wings. This conversation requires subtlety mortal minds can comprehend, she explained, her voice now lacking the otherworldly echo but still carrying undeniable authority. The conjunction approaches, the alignment of cosmic forces that allows for transition between universal cycles. Cynthia's eyes widened in recognition. The passing of ages, it's not just legend. Few of your myths are just legends, champion, Giratina replied with the ghost of a smile. Though many have lost their original meaning through millennia of retelling. She turned to Naruto. You were created for this moment, when the old cycle ends and new creation becomes necessary. The union of Arceus and the Shinigami produced exactly what the multiverse are. Equires. A being capable of both unmaking what must end and creating what must begin. The weight of those words hit Naruto like a physical blow. All his life, he'd struggled to be acknowledged, to prove his worth. To protect his precious people. Now he was being told his purpose was cosmic in scale, to preside over the death of worlds and birth of new ones. No, he said firmly. I won't be responsible for ending existence. Not ending, Giratina corrected, transitioning. There is a difference, Godeling. Naruto-kun doesn't destroy without reason, Hinata interjected, her quiet voice carrying surprising strength. If there's another way to save both worlds, he'll find it. Giratina studied her with newfound interest. The mortal speaks with conviction about divine matters. Her red gaze shifted between Hinata and Naruto, noting something that seemed to amuse her. Ah, I see, love, that most unpredictable of mortal forces. Before anyone could respond to that observation, the ground beneath them trembled violently. Around them, celestic towns' buildings swayed dangerously. In the sky above, the dimensional fractures widened, showing not just Konoha now but other realms, landscapes of fire and ice. Oceans that flowed upward, forests where every leaf glowed with internal light. The convergence accelerates, Giratina observed calmly while the cultists looked on with expressions ranging from terror to rapture. Your awakening catalyzes the process, Godeling. The more your powers manifest, the faster reality responds. Then I'll stop using them. Naruto declared. Impossible. They are what you are now. Not merely abilities you wield. Giratina's human form approached him, moving with predatory grace. You cannot stop being what you were born to become. Watch me, Naruto challenged. Blue eyes flashing with the determination that had defined his entire life. I make my own destiny. For the first time, something like genuine emotion crossed Giratina's face, not anger as expected, but a complex mixture of exasperation and what might have been respect. Your human stubbornness persists, she noted. Perhaps that's why Arceus chose as it did. Creation always did favor unlikely champions. Another, stronger tremor shook the ground. In the distance, a massive crack appeared in the earth, glowing with the same purple energy that permeated the distortion world. From it rose what looked like ghostly trees, flora from another dimension bleeding into Sinnoh. Time grows short, Giratina said, her tone turning urgent. Seek Arceus if you must, but understand this. Godeling, the cycle cannot be stopped, only guided. Your choice is not whether worlds end, but how they transition and what rises after. She began to revert to her draconic form, her human shape elongating and growing translucent. I will maintain what balance I can from the reverse, but the boundaries thin beyond even my ability to stabilize. When we meet again, you will have either embraced your purpose or doomed all existence to the void. With those ominous words, Giratina retreated through the dimensional gateway. The portal remained open, however, continuing to spill distortion world energy into Celestic Town. My lord waits for you to accept the inevitable, Vera told Naruto, backing toward the portal with her fellow cultists. Until then, we prepare the world for transition. Stop, Cynthia commanded, but the cultists had already slipped through the dimensional opening, which contracted behind them until it was merely the entrance to an ordinary cave once more. For a moment, no one spoke. Around them, Celestic Town's residents emerged cautiously from their homes, staring in wonder and fear at the transformed landscape, patches of foreign vegetation sprouting between cobblestones. Wild Pokémon exhibiting new colorations and behaviors, the sky itself a patchwork of Sinnoh's atmosphere and glimpses of other worlds. It's already happening, Cynthia observed grimly. The worlds bleed into one another. Hinata, her Byakugan still active, nodded. I can see chakra patterns forming in the ground here, like the natural energy networks in our world, but different. And she pointed to a flock of starlies circling overhead. Those creatures are developing chakra coils of their own. The biological systems of both worlds adapting to each other, Professor Rowan theorized. Having joined them outside during the confrontation. Remarkable from a scientific perspective, but potentially catastrophic for established ecosystems. Naruto stared at his hands, feeling the power that now flowed through him. Not just chakra, not just the Nine Tails energy, but something more fundamental. With merely a thought, he could shape this energy, direct it, create with it. To test this theory, he focused on a barren patch of ground nearby. Extending his hand, he channeled a small portion of the golden energy that now supplemented his familiar blue chakra. The earth responded instantly, sprouting vibrant grass unlike any species native to either world, blades that shimmered with subtle energy and seemed to sing softly in the breeze. Did I just create a new plant species? He asked, staring at the result in wonder and alarm. It appears so, Professor Rowan confirmed, already kneeling to examine the grass with scientific curiosity. Cellular structure unlike anything in our botanical records, yet perfectly viable. Extraordinary. Hinata joined him, her Byakugan providing additional insight. It has both chakra channels like our plants and He energy circulation system of this world's vegetation. A perfect hybrid. Cynthia watched Naruto carefully, noting the mixed emotions playing across his face. Creation comes naturally to you, she observed. As it should, given your heritage. But I didn't even know what I was making, Naruto protested. I just wanted something to grow there. Intent made manifest, Professor Rowan murmured, still examining the new plant life. The fundamental mechanism of divine creation, according to the oldest myths. Naruto stepped back from his creation, unsettled by how effortlessly it had happened. Throughout his life, he'd worked tirelessly for every accomplishment, every new jutsu mastered, every acknowledgement earned. This power that simply responded to his wishes felt wrong somehow. Too easy, too godlike. Hinata, sensing his discomfort, moved to his side and gently took his hand. Naruto-kun, this is still you, she said softly. New abilities don't change who you are inside. He squeezed her hand gratefully, anchoring himself in the familiar warmth of her presence. Thanks, Hinata, I needed that reminder. Cynthia, meanwhile, had shifted to tactical considerations. We need to move quickly. If the distortion cult has established resonance points throughout Sinnoh as they claimed, they're deliberately accelerating the dimensional breakdown. And we still need to find the azure flute to properly commune with Arceus, Professor Rowan added. The archives confirm the time-space altar can only be fully activated with its music. Then we split up, Naruto decided. Hinata and I will track down these cult resonance points and disable them. Cynthia, you and Professor Rowan focus on locating the azure flute fragments. Actually, Cynthia countered, I should go with you. My knowledge of Sinnoh's geography and legendary sites will be crucial for identifying the cult's targets. Professor Rowan can coordinate research from here while we're in the field. Naruto nodded, acknowledging the logic. Makes sense. Hinata's Byakugan can detect the energy signatures we're looking for. Your knowledge can get us to the right locations, and I can, apparently, create things and stuff. His attempt at humor earned small smiles from both women, easing the tension momentarily. We should begin with Eterna City, Cynthia suggested. It's home to the oldest known statue of Arceus in the region. Likely one of the cult's primary targets. How do we get there? Hinata asked practically. I saw flying creatures earlier. My Togekiss can carry 2 passengers. But not 3 comfortably for long distances, Cynthia said, considering their options. And given the dimensional instabilities, conventional teleportation via psychic Pokémon might be dangerous. Naruto grinned, an idea forming. I think I might have a solution. He bit his thumb, drawing blood, and performed a series of hand signs familiar to any Konoha shinobi. Summoning jutsu, he slammed his palm to the ground, producing a complex ceiling array that expanded outward. A cloud of smoke erupted, and from it emerged a toad the size of a small house, orange-red with blue markings around its eyes and wearing a blue jacket. Yo, Naruto. The toad greeted in a booming voice that sent nearby townspeople scurrying for cover. What's the big idea summoning me to wherever this is? He looked around, taking in the unfamiliar landscape and the dimensional fractures still visible in the sky. Actually, where are we? This ain't the Hidden Leaf or Mount Myoboku. Good to see you too, Gamakichi. Naruto replied with genuine pleasure at seeing a familiar face from home. It's a long story, but short version. Different world, dimensional crisis, apparently I'm part god, and we need transportation. The giant toad blinked slowly, processing this information. Right, one of those situations. He turned his massive head to examine Hinata and Cynthia. Hey, Hinata, and new human I don't know. Cynthia of Celestic Town. The champion introduced herself with remarkable composure for someone meeting a talking toad the size of a house. Sinnoh Region Champion. A pleasure, Gam. Akachi replied with surprising politeness. Any friend of Naruto's who isn't trying to kill him is good in my book. He turned back to Naruto. So, where are we headed, O Divine One? Naruto winced at the title. Please don't call me that. Eterna City is our destination. Cynthia can guide you. Hop on then, the toad invited, lowering himself to allow the three humans to climb onto his broad back. Fair warning. Toad jumping isn't the smoothest ride for first-timers. As they settled onto Gamakichi's back, Cynthia leaned toward Naruto with scholarly curiosity. A summoning contract with intelligent amphibians. Your world has fascinating parallels to our legendary Pokémon traditions. The toads of Mount Myoboku have been allied with Konoha shinobi for generations, Naruto explained as Gamakichi prepared to leap. My father signed their contract, and my teacher before him. Legacy passing through bloodlines and mentorship, Cynthia noted. Much like our Pokémon training traditions. Further conversation was cut short as Gamakichi launched himself skyward with explosive force, covering hundreds of meters in a single bound. Hinata, accustomed to shinobi travel methods, maintained her balance easily. Cynthia, despite her initial surprise, adapted quickly with the natural poise that made her as formidable in Pokémon contests as in battles. From their elevated vantage point, the true scope of the dimensional convergence became apparent. Throughout Sinnoh, patches of foreign landscape had appeared, sections of forest that matched Konoha's distinctive ecology, small lakes water that flowed according to different physical laws, even the occasional building or structure that had partially materialized from the shinobi world. More concerning were the areas where Neath world seemed dominant. Zones of swirling energy where reality itself appeared unformed, raw potential waiting to be shaped. Near one such zone, Naruto spotted a familiar darkness gathering, the void entity, or something similar. Feeding on the dimensional instability. We need to hurry, he said grimly, pointing out the darkness to his companions. The void spreads wherever reality weakens. Cynthia nodded, directing Gamakichi with precise instructions toward Eterna City's distant silhouette. As they traveled, Naruto found himself unconsciously reaching for Hinata's hand again, drawing comfort from her steady presence in this increasingly unstable world. The Hyuga heiress responded with a gentle squeeze, her pale eyes meeting his with unwavering confidence. We'll find a way, Naruto-kun, she said simply. Together. From Cynthia's other side came a complimentary assurance, offered with the champion's characteristic calm certainty. Both our worlds have faced extinction-level threats before. With cooperation and knowledge, there's always a path forward. Naruto nodded, drawing strength from their conviction. Whatever cosmic role he was supposedly born to fulfill, whatever divine heritage flowed through his veins. One truth remained constant. He would protect those precious to him, world-ending prophecies be damned. As Gamakichi bounded toward Eterna City, the sky continued to fracture above them. Showing glimpses of not just Konoha now, but other realms entirely, dimensions neither human had ever witnessed. The convergence was accelerating, just as Giratina had warned. Time was running out for two worlds caught in the crossfire of cosmic forces beyond mortal comprehension. But mortals, as both Naruto and Cynthia had proven throughout their respective journeys, had a remarkable capacity for defying cosmic expectations. And perhaps, Naruto thought as they approached their destination, that very human determination was exactly why two gods had conspired to create him in the first place. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, Realms Between Worlds. Eterna City existed in a curious state of temporal contradiction. Ancient structures stood alongside modern buildings, the Amis statue of unknown origin casting long shadows across sleek storefronts. Unlike Celestic Town's deliberate preservation of tradition, Eterna had evolved organically, each generation adding its to the historical palimpsest without erasing what came before. At least, that's how it had been before the convergence began. Now, as Naruto, Hinata, and Cynthia approached atop Gamakichi's massive form, they could see the city had become something else entirely, a patchwork of realities stitched together without pattern or purpose. The northeastern district had transformed completely, Tradit. Ional Konoha architecture replacing Sinnoh buildings. The central plaza surrounding the ancient statue now featured a circular pool that hadn't existed previously, its waters flowing in defiance of gravity. Most concerning were the areas between these transplanted zones, stretches of unformed reality, shimmering like heat mirages, occasionally solidifying into brief, impossible structures before dissolving again. Dimensional decay accelerates, Cynthia observed, her calm voice belying the alarm in her eyes. The boundaries between worlds are breaking down faster than projected. Gamakichi NDED with surprising delicacy on the outskirts, careful to avoid the unstable zones. This place feels wrong, the giant toad commented, shivering despite his size. Like reality's got indigestion. Apt description, Naruto muttered, sliding from the toad's back. The moment his feet touched Eterna's soil, ripples of golden energy spread outward through the ground, temporarily stabilizing the fluctuations in a 20-meter radius. He felt the change immediately, a drain on his newly awakened powers that hadn't been present in Celestic Town. Your presence affects the convergence, Hinata noted, her Byakugan active as she observed the energy patterns. The instabilities respond to you. Not just respond, Cynthia added, analytical mind processing the implications. They're drawn to you, like a lodestone attracting metal filings. Your divine essence acts as both catalyst and potential stabilizer. Naruto frowned, concentrating on the sensation. It's like they're hungry, seeking something from me. Creation energy, Cynthia theorized. These unformed spaces lack the fundamental pattern that defines reality. They instinctively seek a template. Gamakichi cleared his throat with a sound like distant thunder. Not to interrupt the fascinating metaphysical discussion, but we've got company. The toad nodded toward the city center, where figures in the now familiar purple robes of the distortion cult gathered around the ancient statue. Even from a distance, they could see the device similar to what had been deployed in Celestic Town, but larger, more elaborate, with pulsing crystalline components that hadn't been present in the previous version. They're upgrading their technology, Cynthia observed grimly. Learning from each deployment. Hinata, what do you see? Naruto asked. The Hyuga heiress narrowed her eyes, veins bulging around them as her Byakugan penetrated the distance. 23 cultists total. The device connects directly to the statue's foundation. There's an energy network beneath the plaza we can't see from here. And, she paused, focusing more intensely. Something's inside the statue. A powerful energy signature, dormant but responding to their equipment. The statue has always been a mystery, Cynthia explained, expression darkening with concern. Predating known civilization in Sinnoh, made from materials not found naturally in our region. Some scholars believe it's not a representation of a legendary Pokémon, but a sealed form of one. And they're trying to wake it up, Naruto concluded. Great, because we didn't have enough problems. He created several shadow clones without hand signs, a skill he'd perfected years ago, and sent them to observe from different angles. Meanwhile, Gamakichi transformed himself with a puff of smoke, shrinking to the size of a normal toad to avoid drawing attention. I'll scout the perimeter, the diminutive amphibian offered. Toads don't exactly blend in here, but I'll attract less notice than you three. As Gamakichi hopped away, Cynthia led them toward an abandoned building that offered cover while providing a clear view of the central plaza. The structure existed in a Urea state of half-transformation. One side remained a typical Sinnoh storefront while the other had adopted architectural elements from Konoha, creating an impossible hybrid that nonetheless maintained structural integrity. We need a plan, she said once they were safely inside. A direct confrontation risks accelerating whatever they've initiated. Naruto nodded, receiving information from H.'s shadow clones through their psychic link. They've established some kind of energy circuit. My clones count 7 focal points around the plaza, all channeling power toward the statue. A ritual septagram, Cynthia identified. An ancient pattern used in Sinnoh's earliest known religious practices, particularly those involving communication with entities beyond normal perception. They're creating a summoning array. Hinata realized, recognizing parallels to techniques from their own world. But summoning what? Before either could respond, one of Naruto's clones dispelled suddenly, not from being discovered, but from the shock of what it had witnessed. The memories flooded back to the original, a tear in reality opening directly above the statue, revealing not the familiar Forest G. Reen of Konoha or the purple haze of the distortion world, but absolute void, an emptiness so complete it seemed to devour light itself. The void entity, Naruto said, his voice tight. They're creating an entry point for it. Impossible, Cynthia countered. Even the distortion cult wouldn't willingly invite oblivion. They worship chaos, not non-existence. Maybe they don't know what they're really summoning, Hinata suggested. Or perhaps they're being manipulated. Whatever the answer, time for deliberation had run out. The device at the plaza's center emitted a piercing tone that seemed to vibrate at a frequency beyond normal hearing yet was felt in bone and teeth. The statue began to glow with internal light, ancient stone becoming translucent enough to reveal a crystalline structure beneath its exterior. We move now, Naruto decided. Hinata, target the energy circuit junctions. Cynthia, your Pokémon can handle the cultists. I'll deal with the device itself. The women nodded, all three moving with the synchronized efficiency of experienced combatants. As they emerged from their hiding place, however, reality itself seemed to shudder around them. The dimensional patch, work of Eterna City rippled like disturbed water, sections phasing in and out of existence momentarily. At the plaza's center, the lead cultist, a rail-thin man with eyes that reflected light like polished metal, raised his arms in triumph. The gate opens, he announced to his followers. The Lord of the Reverse shall manifest in true form. That's not Giratina they're summoning, Cynthia muttered as they rushed forward. The resonance pattern is all wrong. She released her Garchomp and Lucario simultaneously, the powerful Pokémon immediately understanding the situation and moving to engage cultists at the perimeter. Hinata darted between them with fluid grace, her gentle fist strikes disabling the energy circuit at critical junctions. Naruto himself created a swarm of shadow clones that descended on the central device, only to find their attacks repelled by some invisible barrier. Mortal techniques cannot disrupt the convergence gate, the lead cultist called out, noticing their intervention. It draws power directly from the space between dimensions. Naruto dismissed his clones and approached the barrier himself, feeling it resist his touch, not solid like a physical wall, but viscous, like pushing through dense liquid. With each centimeter he advanced, golden energy flared around him, creation power instinctively responding to the unnatural construct. You're right, he called back. Mortal techniques won't work. Good thing I've got something else. Concentrating, he reached for the wellspring of divine power he'd been consciously avoiding since its awakening. His response was immediate and overwhelming. Golden light erupted from his body, surrounding him in an aura reminiscent of his Nine Tails chakra mode but fundamentally different. Where that power had felt wild and primal, this energy responded with intelligent precision to his slightest thought. The barrier shattered like glass, fragments dissolving into motes of light as Naruto stepped through. He reached the device in 3 long strides, hands moving to dismantle it, only to freeze as the dimensional tear above the statue widened dramatically, revealing a glimpse of what waited beyond. It wasn't the void entity as he'd feared, nor was it Giratina. Instead, through the tear floated a massive crystalline structure, a perfectly geometric shape composed of faces and angles that seemed to shift when viewed directly, as though existing in more dimensions than human perception could process. At its core pulsed a light that was somehow both blindingly bright and absolute darkness, oscillating between states with increasing frequency. The origin crystal, breathed the lead cultist in reverent awe, the seed from which all reality germinated, and the key to unmaking it, added a new voice, feminine, authoritative, and unmistakably powerful. From the dimensional tear emerged a figure Naruto recognized immediately despite her changed form. Giratina in her human aspect descended slowly, those 6 shadowy streamers flowing behind her like phantom wings. Her red eyes surveyed the plaza, noting the positions of combatants with predatory assessment before settling on Naruto. You access your heritage at last, Godeling, she observed, hovering a meter above the statue. Though still like a child playing with forces beyond comprehension, Naruto stood his ground before the ancient entity. Whatever you're doing stops now, Giratina. These cultists are tampering with forces that threaten both our worlds. Of course they are, she replied with surprising agreement. That's precisely why I guided their efforts. You're helping them destabilize reality. Cynthia's voice cut through the chaos as she approached, Garchomp at her side having dispatched several cultists. You're a guardian of cosmic balance. Giratina's laugh was like distant thunder. I am the Lord of Antimatter, champion. My purpose has always been to counter Arceus's rigid order with necessary entropy. Without me, creation would stagnate and collapse under its own unchanging weight. Her attention returned to Naruto. The origin crystal responds to your presence, Godeling. It recognizes the dual heritage age you carry, the creative spark of Arceus and the entropic essence of the Shinigami. The crystalline structure above them pulsed more rapidly, each oscillation sending ripples of distortion through Eterna City's already compromised reality. Buildings flickered between states, sometimes appearing as they had been, sometimes transforming into structures from Konoha, sometimes becoming things that had never existed in either world. What is this thing? Naruto demanded, feeling a strange resonance between the crystal and his own energy. The fulcrum point of all dimensions, Giratina answered. Neither fully real nor unreal, but the potential from which all manifestation arises. Arceus used it to shape the original universe, then sealed it away lest its power be misused. And now you're unleashing it. Hinata joined them, having disabled the last energy junction. Why? Giratina studied the Hyuga with that same predatory assessment. Because the multiverse requires recalibration, human. The boundaries between dimensions have grown rigid, preventing necessary exchange of energy and information. Stagnation approaches, so you risk total collapse to prevent stagnation. Cynthia challenged. The dimensional instabilities are spreading beyond control, even to worlds you have no authority over. A calculated risk, Giratina conceded, but one made necessary by Arceus's excessive caution. Creation must be allowed to evolve, to change, even if that process is temporarily disruptive. While they spoke, Naruto studied the origin crystal with more than just his eyes. His WLY awakened senses perceived layers of information invisible to normal sight, the complex energy patterns flowing through the geometric structure, the way it connected to multiple dimensional planes simultaneously, and most importantly, how it resonated with his own divine essence. An idea formed, risky, potentially catastrophic if he miscalculated, but possibly their only option to prevent further deterioration. Hinata, he said quietly, I need your eyes. Can you see how this thing connects to different realities? She activated her Byakugan again, studying the crystal with her unique perception. Yes, it extends tendrils of energy into at least 12 different dimensional planes that I can perceive, possibly more beyond my range. And the connections to our worlds, Konoha and here. She focused more intently, stronger than the others, pulsing with your energy signature specifically. Naruto nodded, suspicions confirmed. It's using me as an anchor point between dimensions. Because I exist in both simultaneously, I'm becoming the nexus of the convergence. Giratina's expression shifted to one of reluctant respect. You understand faster than expected, Godeling. Yes, your dual nature makes you the ideal conduit for dimensional recalibration. Which means I can potentially control it, Naruto concluded. Or at least influence how it affects our worlds. Theoretically, Giratina agreed. Though mastering such power without preparation would challenge even a fully realized deity, let alone one still coming into their inheritance. Naruto's response was characteristically direct. Then teach me. His declaration seemed to surprise even Giratina, her eternal composure momentarily disturbed. You would accept guidance from the Lord of Antimatter. The being your creator aspect sought to imprison for challenging its authority. I don't care about cosmic politics, Naruto replied. I care about protecting innocent people caught in the crossfire of whatever divine drama is playing out. If learning from you helps me do that, then pride isn't going to stop me. Giratina studied him for a long moment, her red eyes unreadable. Finally, she descended fully to stand before him. close enough that the shadowy streamers from her back brushed against his shoulders like cold silk. Perhaps Arceus chose better than I credited, she murmured. Very well, Godling. I will teach you to harness your creation-destruction balance, but know this, such training is neither gentle nor assured of success. Many who have attempted to wield dual-natured power have been consumed by it. Naruto-kun, Hinata intervened, concern evident in her voice. Are you sure about this? She admitted to causing the dimensional disruptions. Guiding their natural progression, Giratina corrected sharply. The cycle of universal renewal was already beginning. I merely ensured it followed the optimal path rather than random deterioration. Which conveniently aligns with your own interests, Cynthia noted skeptically. Of course, Giratina acknowledged without shame. I am what I am, the necessary counterbalance to rigid order. But consider, champion, would you prefer the void entity directing these changes instead? Because in the absence of guided transition, that nothingness beyond existence would gladly fill the vacuum. The crystal pulsed again, more violently this time. Around them, what remained of stable reality in Eterna City began to dissolve at an accelerated rate. The cultists who hadn't been disabled by Hinata or Cynthia's Pokémon prostrated themselves before their patron deity, chanting in a language that seemed to physically distort the air around them. We're out of time for debate, Naruto decided. Giratina, if you're going to teach me, it needs to happen now. The antimatter deity nodded once, decisively. The distortion world is better suited for your initial training. The malleable reality there will respond more safely to your developing powers. I'm going with him, Hinata stated rather than asked, moving to Naruto's side. As am I, Cynthia added, her tone equally resolute. My knowledge of legendary Pokémon and dimensional phenomena may prove useful. Giratina's expression soured slightly. Mortals will only complicate the process. They're non-negotiable, Naruto countered firmly. I don't operate alone, and I don't abandon my friends. For a moment, it seemed the ancient deity might refuse. Then, surprisingly, her expression shifted to one of sardonic amusement. Attachment to mortals, another quality Arceus would consider a weakness that I find oddly compelling. Very well, bring your human companions if you must. She gestured toward the dimensional tear above the statue, which widened further at her command. Enter the reverse. We begin immediately. What about the crystal? Hinata asked practically. And the cultists? Giratina waved a dismissive hand. The origin crystal will remain in dimension suspension until you learn to properly interface with it. As for my misguided worshippers, she turned to address the cult leader directly. Return to your assigned observation points. Monitor the convergence patterns as instructed. The man bowed deeply. As you command, mistress of the reverse. With surprising coordination, the remaining cultists gathered their equipment, though notably leaving the device connected to the statue intact, and dispersed into the fragmented city. Cynthia watched them go with clear misgivings. They'll continue their work elsewhere, she pointed out. Of course, Giratina replied. The dimensional recalibration must proceed, but under my direct supervision rather than their enthusiastic but imprecise interpretations of my will. Before further objections could be raised, she gestured again at the portal. Now, Godling, the longer we delay, the more chaotic the convergence becomes without proper guidance. Naruto exchanged glances with Hinata and Cynthia, receiving silent confirmation of their readiness. He then created a shadow clone and instructed it, find Gamakichi. Tell him what's happening and have him report back to Konoha that we're working on a solution. The clone nodded and departed in search of the toad. Naruto then turned to the portal, took a deep breath, and stepped through the dimensional boundary into the distortion world, followed immediately by Hinata. Then Cynthia, and finally Giratina herself, who sealed the rift behind them with a casual gesture. The transition was disorienting in its completeness. One moment EY stood in the fractured reality of Eterna City, the next, they occupied a realm where conventional physics existed merely as a polite suggestion rather than law. Islands of rock floated at impossible angles, connected by pathways that twisted back on themselves in non-Euclidean configurations. Waterfalls flowed sideways, upward, sometimes splitting into multiple streams that each followed different gravitational rules. The sky, if it could be called that, was a perpetual twilight of purple and black, occasionally shot through with lightning that moved too deliberately to be natural. "Welcome to my domain," Giratina announced. Her human form growing more substantial here, the shadowy streamers behind her expanding to resemble proper wings. The distortion world, the necessary counterbalance to Arceus's ordered creation. Naruto found that maintaining his footing required conscious effort, as gravity seemed to shift with his expectations rather than remaining constant. Beside him, Hinata activated her Byakugan to better navigate the disorienting environment, while Cynthia adapted with the practiced ease of someone who had visited this realm before. "The rules here are fluid," Giratina explained, moving with perfect confidence across a path that appeared to curve at physically impossible angles. "Reality responds to will rather than fixed laws. It is the perfect training ground for one learning to manipulate fundamental forces." "So what exactly am I learning to do?" Naruto asked, carefully following her path while helping Hinata navigate the treacherous terrain. "To balance creation and destruction," Giratina replied simply. "Your heritage grants you both powers, but they naturally oppose each other. Creation seeks to manifest, destruction to unmake. Without perfect equilibrium between them, you risk either uncontrolled generation of reality, spawning chaotic existence without form or purpose, or unintended annihilation." She led them to a relatively stable floating island, large enough to serve as a makeshift training ground. At its center was a perfectly circular pool of water that somehow remained contained despite the island's various shifts in orientation. "This pool reflects the true nature of any who gaze into it," Giratina explained. "For you, Godeling, it will reveal the current state of your internal balance." Naruto approached cautiously, peering into waters that seemed far deeper than physically possible. Instead of his reflection, he saw swirling energies, golden light representing creation power and deep purple-black shadowy forces signifying his destruction aspect. Currently, the golden light dominated, with only thin veins of shadow winding through it. "Your creation aspect ascends first," Giratina observed. "Natural, given your errant optimism and life-affirming nature. But dangerous, unchecked creation without the tempering influence of endings leads to cancerous growth, reality multiplying beyond sustainability. So I need to embrace my destruction powers more?" Naruto asked skeptically. "You need balance," Giratina corrected. "Neither aspect ascending permanently over the other, but working in perfect harmony. Creation where needed, dissolution where necessary. Like the natural cycle," Cynthia observed from where she stood examining a peculiar formation of crystals nearby. "Life requires death to maintain equilibrium." "Precisely, champion," Giratina acknowledged with mild surprise at the human's insight. "The Godeling must learn to wield both forces consciously rather than allowing them to manifest chaotically." "How?" Naruto asked practically. Giratina gestured to the open space around them. "Create something, anything, then learn to uncreate it with equal precision." Naruto hesitated only briefly before extending his hand, calling forth the golden energy that now came so readily. With focused intent, he shaped it into a simple form, a perfect sphere of light that hovered above the island's surface. "Good," Giratina approved. "Now, reach for your destruction aspect. Feel the shadow power within you, the heritage of the Shinigami." This proved more challenging, where the creation energy responded eagerly to Naruto's call. The destructive force remained elusive, slipping away whenever he tried to grasp it directly. "You resist your death aspect," Giratina observed. "Understandable but problematic. It is as much a part of you as your creative power." "I've spent my whole life protecting people," Naruto explained, frustration evident in his voice. "Destruction doesn't come naturally to me." "Doesn't it?" Giratina countered, red eyes narrowing. "You've never destroyed an enemy, demolished an obstacle, dismantled a threat." "That's different. Only in purpose, not in essence," she interrupted. "Destruction in service of protection is still destruction. Your resistance is philosophical, not innate." Hinata, who had been observing quietly, spoke up. "Naruto-kun doesn't fear destruction itself. He fears uncontrolled power that might harm innocence." Giratina studied the Hyuga with renewed interest. "You understand him well, human." Her gaze returned to Naruto. "She identifies the true obstacle. You fear your own potential for unintended harm." "With good reason," Naruto countered. "I've seen what happens when people with too much power lose control." "Then don't lose control," Giratina stated simply. "Master it instead." She moved closer, those shadowy wings spreading wider. Perhaps you require motivation. Observe. With a casual gesture, she opened a all viewing portal beside them, a window into the primary dimension showing Eterna City. The deterioration had accelerated dramatically in their absence, with over half the city now transformed into a chaotic blend of multiple realities. Worse, dark tendrils of void energy had begun creeping through the areas of greatest instability, the nothingness beyond existence slowly consuming what remained. The void entity senses opportunity in chaos, Giratina explained. Without balanced intervention, it will devour both worlds entirely. The sight of familiar Konoha buildings being slowly erased by creeping darkness struck Naruto like a physical blow. These weren't just abstract realities at stake. These were homes, communities, places filled with people he had sworn to protect. Something shifted within him at the thought, a cold certainty rising from depths he hadn't known existed. The shadow energy responded now, flowing up through his chakra network to mingle with golden creation power. In the reflection pool, the balance shifted slightly, dark veins expanding within the golden light. Yes, Giratina encouraged, accept both aspects of your heritage. Neither is inherently good or evil, they simply are, like gravity or time. Quote, Naruto extended his other hand toward the sphere of light he had created. This time, instead of creative energy, he channeled the shadow power, not to destroy chaotically, but to deconstruct with precision. The sphere responded immediately, dissolving from the outside inward, each particle returning to potential rather than simply ceasing to exist. Excellent, Giratina approved. Creation and destruction in balanced measure. The foundation of cosmic maintenance. Naruto stared at his hands, one still trailing golden motes of light, the other wreathed in subtle shadow. The sensations were distinctly different yet complementary, like two instruments playing counterpoint in the same symphony. It's not about good versus evil, he realized aloud. It's about completion, a cycle that needs both parts. The Godeling comprehends, Giratina noted with satisfaction. Perhaps there is hope for your ascension after all. Don't call me that, Naruto said automatically. I'm still just. You were never just anything, Hinata interrupted gently. Not to those who truly saw you. Her quiet certainty grounded him as it always had, providing an emotional anchor amid these cosmic revelations. Naruto gave her a grateful smile before returning his attention to Giratina. What's next? Application, the antimatter deity replied. Creating and dissolving simple energy constructs is merely the beginning. You must learn to affect more complex systems, matter, space, even time to some degree. And how exactly do I practice that without potentially destroying something important? Naruto asked reasonably. By creating your own realm to experiment within, Giratina answered. A pocket dimension, connected to but separate from primary reality. Cynthia, who had been documenting their surroundings with a small device, looked up sharply. Creating dimensions is possible. I thought only Palkia could manipulate spatial boundaries to that degree. Palkia manipulates existing space, Giratina corrected. What the Godeling must learn is the creation of new space, reality that exists because he wills it to exist. The concept seemed simultaneously absurd and somehow inevitable to Naruto. Throughout his life, the scale of his abilities had constantly expanded, from academy student struggling with basic clone techniques to sage capable of battling gods. This was simply the next evolution, albeit a quantum leap beyond anything he'd previously considered. How do I start? He asked, practical as always when faced with learning new skills. Envision the space you wish to create, Giratina instructed. Not just visually, but in all sensory aspects, sound, scent, texture, atmosphere. The more complete your conception, the more stable the result. Naruto closed his eyes, concentrating. He imagined a simple environment, a clearing in a forest reminiscent of Konoha's training grounds, but with elements of Sinnoh's ecosystem integrated harmoniously. He pictured the feel of grass underfoot, the scent of pine and distant flowering plants, the sound of leaves rustling in a gentle breeze. Now, Giratina continued, extend both aspects of your power simultaneously. Creation to manifest the space, destruction to carve its boundaries from the fabric of potential. Following her guidance, Naruto channeled both energies, not separately as before, but intertwined. Golden light and shadow mixing to form something new. The power flowed from him in expanding waves, creating distortions in the already malleable reality of the distortion world. A seam appeared in the air before them, not a jagged tear like the dimensional rifts plaguing both worlds, but a clean division, as though reality had been neatly folded along an invisible crease. Through it, they could see the environment Naruto had envisioned, perfect in every detail down to individual blades of grass swaying in a breeze that existed nowhere else. Impressive first attempt, Giratina acknowledged. Now stabilize it by establishing boundary parameters. Naruto frowned in concentration, instinctively understanding what was required. He extended his awareness into the newly formed space, defining its limits, not as rigid walls, but as gradual transitions that allowed it to exist separately while remaining connected to the greater multiverse. It's beautiful, Hinata murmured, her Byakugan perceiving layers of the creation invisible to normal sight. The energy patterns are perfectly harmonized. Remarkable efficiency, Cynthia agreed, her scientific mind analyzing what her senses could detect. No wasted energy, no destabilizing fluctuations. Giratina circled the dimensional opening, inspecting it from multiple angles with critical assessment. Functional, if simplistic. The true test is whether it maintains integrity when occupied. She gestured for Naruto to proceed. With cautious steps, he approached the boundary between realities and past. Through, experiencing a subtle shift as he transitioned from Giratina's realm to his own creation. The sensations were exactly as he had imagined, the specific texture of grass beneath his feet, the particular quality of sunlight filtering through leaves, the unique scent profile of the forest he had conceptualized. It worked, he called back to the others, voice carrying clearly across the dimensional boundary. It's stable. Hinata followed him through, her expression one of wonder as she experienced the world he had literally willed into existence. Cynthia came next, her analytical observer. Chion temporarily giving way to simple appreciation. You created this from nothing, she marveled, examining a nearby flower that existed nowhere in either Sinnoh or the shinobi world, a hybrid born purely from Naruto's imagination. Not from nothing, Giratina corrected as she joined them, her form adjusting slightly to the different physical laws of this realm. From potential, all possibility, exist simultaneously in the quantum field. The Godeling simply selected one and gave it predominance. Naruto barely heard the explanation, too absorbed in the profound realization of what he had accomplished. This wasn't a genjutsu illusion or even a summoned environment. This was an entirely new reality, one that would continue to exist independent of his direct attention. The implications were simultaneously exhilarating and terrifying. This could be a safe haven, Hinata realized, practical applications immediately apparent to her tactical mind. A place unaffected by the dimensional convergence where people could shelter if necessary. Temporarily, Giratina qualified. This pocket dimension remains connected to the primary realities through its creator. If those realities destabilize completely, this space would eventually follow. But it buys time, Cynthia noted, and potentially provides a neutral ground where representatives from both worlds could meet safely to coordinate responses. Naruto nodded, already considering how to expand and refine this creation. I can make it larger, add structures. One step at a time, Godeling, Giratina cautioned. Maintaining dimensional integrity requires constant subconscious attention. Overextend, and you risk collapse. She moved to the center of the clearing, her shadowy wings folding behind her. You've demonstrated basic creation capability. Now we must address the more challenging aspect, controlled destruction. The antimatter deity gestured, and a portion of the forest Naruto had created shimmered, revealing a glimpse of Konoha through a transparent barrier, specifically, the Hokage monument with its familiar carved faces. But something was wrong. Dark tendrils of void energy crept across the stone features, gradually erasing them from existence. This is happening now, Giratina informed them. The void entity grows bolder, targeting symbols of authority and stability first to maximize chaos. Naruto's expression hardened into determination. How do I stop it? You must learn to unmake what another has unmade, Giratina replied cryptically. Destruction is not merely annihilation, it can also be the selective removal of that which does not belong. Understanding dawned. You're saying I can use destruction power against the void itself. The shadow aspect of your heritage derives from the Shinigami, a death god, yes. but one with authority over what dies and what continues. Unlike the void entity, which consumes indiscriminately, your destruction power can be precisely targeted. Naruto approached the viewing portal, studying the erosion pattern across the monument. The void's progression wasn't random. It followed weaknesses in reality's fabric, exploiting dimensional stress points to maximize its spread. I need to try something, he decided. Can you make this portal two-way, so I can affect what's on the other side? Giratina considered briefly before nodding. With a gesture, the barrier between dimensions thinned further, becoming permeable to energy if not physical passage. Naruto extended his hands, calling forth the shadow aspect of his power, not with reluctance now, but with purposeful intent. The dark energy responded differently this time, flowing like liquid night between his fingers as he shaped it with his will. Hinata, guide me, he requested. Your eyes can see the exact boundaries of the void corruption. She stepped beside him, Byakugan active. The void energy penetrates approximately 3 centimeters into the stone at the leading edge, deeper at the central points of each face. It's not just erasing physical matter, it's removing the very concept of the monument from reality. With her precision guidance, Naruto directed his shadow power through the portal, targeting the void corruption specifically. Where the energies met, a curious phenomenon occurred. Neither cancelled the other directly, but Naruto's controlled destruction seemed to push back the chaotic erasure, establishing boundaries the void could not cross. It's working, Cynthia observed, monitoring the interaction with both visual assessment and readings from her devices. You're not restoring what was lost, but preventing further degradation. Containment is the first step, Giratina confirmed. Creation cannot directly counter void. Attempting to do so merely gives it more to consume. But destruction used with precision can establish limits, defining what the void is not permitted to touch. For several minutes, Naruto maintained the effort, systematic all. Why establishing boundaries around each area of void corruption? The process required intense concentration. Not just power, but finesse, applying exactly the right amount of shadow energy to counter the void without causing additional damage. Finally, the corruption stopped spreading. The Hokage monument remained partially damaged, sections of stone face erased from existence, but the progression had halted. Naruto lowered his hands, the shadow energy dissipating. That's only temporary, isn't it? Yes, Giratina acknowledged. The void entity will test your boundaries, seeking weaknesses. But you've demonstrated the basic principle. Your destruction aspect can counter its influence when properly applied. Hinata placed a supportive hand on his shoulder. You saved most of the monument, Naruto-kun. That's significant progress. Indeed, Cynthia agreed, and potentially applicable to other affected areas throughout both our worlds. Naruto nodded, but his expression remained troubled. It's not enough. Containment just maintains the status quo. We need to actually push back the void, restore what's been taken. That, Giratina said, requires the next level of mastery, simultane. Aus application of both aspects in perfect balance. Creation to restore, destruction to precisely excise the void's influence. How do I? His question was interrupted by a sudden tremor that shook the pocket dimension, not from within, but from without, as though some massive force had struck the distortion world to which it remained connected. Giratina's head snapped up, red eyes widening in uncharacteristic alarm. Something breaches my domain, something that should not be. The viewing portal flickered, then shifted focus automatically, no longer showing Konoha, but a different section of the distortion world. There, amidst the floating islands and impossible geography, stood a figure Naruto recognized despite having never personally encountered him in this form. Uchiha Madara, or rather, something wearing his appearance like an ill-fitting suit. This version of the legendary Uchiha was wrong in subtle but disturbing ways. His skin held an unnatural gray pallor, and where his GHTI should have displayed the Rinnegan, there was instead an orb of absolute darkness. Black fluid dripped constantly from this void eye, sizzling into nothingness when it touched any surface. Impossible, Naruto breathed. Madara was redeemed before the end. His soul passed on. That is not Madara, Giratina stated flatly. It is something using his form, a fragment of a possibility, given substance by the dimensional chaos. A shadow of Madara, Hinata suggested, her Byakugan revealing details invisible to others. Its chakra network is incomplete, like a partial copy, or a corrupted version from another timeline, Cynthia proposed, familiar with multidimensional theory through her research. The convergence may be pulling in elements from parallel realities, not just our primary worlds. Whatever its origin, the entity that resembled Madara was causing immediate problems. With each step it took through the distortion world, reality warped around it, not bending as it naturally did in this realm, but breaking, leaving trails of void-like emptiness in its wake. It seeks you, Godeling, Giratina realized, observing how the entity methodically moved in their general direction despite being in a different section of the reverse. The void corruption has gained enough autonomy to create avatars. Then I'll meet it, Naruto decided, already moving toward the boundary of his pocket dimension. Better to confront it here than let it find its way to either of our primary worlds. Wait, Giratina commanded, her tone sharp enough to halt him momentarily. You've barely begun to master your dual nature. Confronting a void avatar prematurely risks corruption of your own power. What choice do we have? It's tearing apart your realm already. The antimatter deity hesitated, clearly calculating probabilities with ancient intelligence. There is another approach. Riskier, but potentially more effective than direct confrontation. I'm listening. The Orig, in crystal you encountered in Eterna City, Giratina explained. It responds to your dual nature. With proper application of both creation and destruction aspects, you could potentially use it to reach T-dimensional boundaries, not just contain the damage, but actively restore proper separation. But you said I wasn't ready to interface with it, Naruto pointed out. You weren't, Giratina agreed. And still aren't, ideally. But circumstances force acceleration of your development. Another tremor shook the pocket dimension as the shadow Madara's destruction spread through the distortion world. Through the viewing portal, they could see it had discovered the trail of energy leading to Naruto's created realm. How do we get back to the crystal? Cynthia asked practically. The portal to Eterna was sealed when we entered the distortion world. I can create a direct path, Giratina replied. But doing so will alert the void avatar to your exact location. You'll have minimal time before it follows. Naruto exchanged glances with Hinata and Cynthia, receiving silent confirmation of their readiness to face whatever came. Do it, he instructed Giratina. We'll handle the consequences. The antimatter deity nodded once, then swept her arms in a complex pattern. Reality before them split cleanly, revealing not the chaotic distortion world but Eterna City's central plaza where the origin crystal still hovered above the ancient statue. Go, Giratina commanded. I will delay the avatar as long as possible, but you must work quickly. The crystal responds to intent. Focus your dual aspects upon it with clear purpose. You're not coming with us? Hinata asked, surprising the deity with her concern. The distortion world is my domain and responsibility, Giratina replied, so. Mething almost like warmth briefly touching her typically cold demeanor. I must maintain its integrity against this intrusion. She turned to Naruto, red eyes meeting his blue ones directly. Remember what you've learned, Godeling. Balance is key, neither aspect ascendant over the other. With that parting instruction, she physically pushed the three of them through the portal into Eterna City. Hen sealed it behind them with a gesture that somehow conveyed both haste and precision. They found themselves standing in Eterna City transformed almost beyond recognition in their absence. What had been merely fractured reality before was now a kaleidoscopic nightmare of conflicting dimensional elements. Buildings from at least 5 different realities occupied the same spaces, overlapping impossibly. The sky above showed simultaneous day and night, sun and stars visible against azure blue. Most concerning were the expanding patches of absolute nothingness, areas where the void entity had already consumed all existence. The situation deteriorates faster than projected, Cynthia observed grimly, her scientific detachment barely masking genuine alarm. Dimensional collapse accelerates exponentially once it passes certain thresholds. The origin crystal pulsed above the ancient statue, its oscillation between light and darkness now so rapid it appeared to exist in both states simultaneously. As they approached, Naruto felt it respond to his presence, the complex geometric structure rotating slightly to align one of its primary faces toward him. It recognizes you, Hinata noted. her Byakugan perceiving energetic connections invisible to normal sight. There are tendrils of power extending from it directly to your chakra network. Naruto nodded, feeling the resonance between his dual nature and the crystal's fundamental structure. It's like looking in a mirror. This thing embodies the same balance I'm trying to master, creative potential and entropic dissolution in perfect equilibrium. The original template, Cynthia suggested, connecting this to her knowledge of Sinnoh mythology. If Arceus used this to shape the original universe as Giratina claimed, it would utterly respond to one carrying Arceus's essence. Before Naruto could approach further, a new dimensional rift tore open nearby, jagged and violent unlike the clean division Giratina had created. Through it stumbled the shadow Madara, its void eye leaking more profusely now, reality dissolving wherever the black fluid touched. Uzumaki Naruto, it spoke, voice layered with multiple tones as though several entities spoke simultaneously. The anomaly, the error in the pattern. Friendly as ever, Madara, Naruto replied, positioning himself between the avatar and his companions. Or whatever you are. The entity's mouth stretched in an approximation of a smile that extended slightly too far to be human. We are inevitability, the final truth all existence denies until the end. Pretty sure you're just a puppet. Naruto countered, the void entity pulling your strings. The shadow Madara tilted its head at an unnatural angle. Terminology is irrelevant. We are the absence that preceded being. The silence before the first word was spoken. And we reclaim what was always ours. It gestured toward the origin crystal, including that abomination of enforced pattern. Not happening, Naruto stated flatly. Shadow clones appearing around him without need for hand signs. Whatever you are, you don't belong in these worlds. Belonging is a concept of ordered minds, the entity replied. We transcend such limitations. Quote, without further dialogue, it attacked, not with recognizable jutsu despite wearing Madara's form, but with tendrils of pure void that extended from its corrupted eye. Where these touched Naruto's shadow clones, they didn't dispel in the usual puff of smoke but simply ceased to exist, erased from reality itself. Physical attacks won't work, Hinata warned. Her Byakugan tracking the void energy's movement. It doesn't exist in conventional space-time. Then we fight on its level, Naruto decided, drawing on both aspects of his divine heritage simultaneously. Golden creation light and shadow destruction energy wrapped around him in a double helix pattern, responding to his will with increasingly intuitive precision. Instead of forming more shadow clones, he shaped this dual power into constructs that matched the void tendrils, tangible manifestations of balanced cosmic force. Where these constructs intercepted the void attacks, neither was immediately consumed. Instead, they engaged in a pushing match of fundamental principles, existence versus non-existence, pattern versus absence, being versus void. While Naruto held the avatar's attention, Cynthia released her Garchomp and Lucario. Create a perimeter, she instructed them. Keep civilians away from the conflict zone. Hinata, meanwhile, assessed the situation with tactical precision. Naruto-kun, the origin crystal reacts whenever your energies flare. I think it's trying to synchronize with you. Naruto nodded, maintaining his defense against the void tendrils while gradual. Why working his way closer to the hovering crystal? Each step brought stronger resonance between his dual powers and the ancient artifact. The shadow Madara seemed to realize his intention. The pattern maker must not touch the origin point, it declared, redoubling its assault. Dissolution is the only truth. You keep saying that, Naruto grunted, straining against the increased pressure. But creation seems pretty real to me. He punctuated this statement by abruptly switching tactics. Instead of merely defending, he sent pulses of creation energy directly at the shadow Madara while simultaneously using destruction energy to carve precise boundaries around it, limiting its movement options. The entity hissed in what might have been pain or merely annoyance. Temporary configurations, meaningless patterns in the eternal silence. If we're so meaningless, Naruto countered, continuing his strategic advance toward the crystal, why are you trying so hard to erase us? The question seemed to momentarily confuse the void avatar, its movements becoming less coordinated. Naruto seized the opportunity, closing the final distance to the origin crystal in 3 quick steps. As his hands made contact with the geometric structure, several things happened simultaneously. The crystal's pulsation synchronized perfectly with his heartbeat. The dual energies flowing through his chakra network expanded exponentially, connecting to dimensional anchor points throughout both primary worlds. And most significantly, knowledge flooded his consciousness, not as organized information, but as raw understanding of cosmic principles beyond mortal comprehension. For one disorienting moment, Naruto perceived the entire multiverse, countless dimensions stacked and nested within each other, connected by threads of fundamental force. He saw the fracture lines spreading between realities, the points where boundaries had already collapsed, and the void entity's true form, a negative space in the fabric of existence. Defined not by what it was, but by what it wasn't. Most crucially, he understood what needed to be done. Hinata, Cynthia, he called, voice resonating with harmonic overtones as the crystal amplified his words. I need you to focus your energy on me. Whatever you can spare. Chakra, Pokémon energy, anything. They complied without hesitation, Hinata channeling her chakra directly while Cynthia instructed her Pokémon to direct their most refined energy attacks toward Naruto, not to harm, but to provide additional power. The Shadow Madara shrieked, recognizing the threat. The pattern must not stabilize. It launched itself bodily toward Naruto, abandoning tactical restraint for desperate intervention. Too late. Naruto had already begun the process, using the origin crystal as both template and amplifier. With perfect balance of creation and destruction aspects, he initiated a cascading reconfiguration, not attempting to fully restore the shattered dimensional boundaries, which would have required power beyond even his enhanced capabilities, but establishing new, stable interfaces between the converging realities. Where worlds had chaotically merged, he created transitional zones. Where the void had consumed reality, he established quarantine boundaries that prevented further spread. Most importantly, he synchronized the physical laws of both primary dimensions, allowing them to coexist without mutual annihilation. The Shadow Madara reached him just as the reconfiguration wave expanded outward from the crystal. As it struck the void avatar, the Tai's borrowed form began to dissolve, not erased as its own victims had been, but deconstructed into component energies, the void influence separated from the fragmented identity it had hijacked. This changes nothing, it hissed as its form unraveled. The void remains eternal. We will return. Probably, Naruto acknowledged, maintaining his focus on the larger pattern. But not today. With a final shriek that echoed across dimensions, the avatar collapsed into scattered energy, the void component retreating through rapidly closing rifts while the fragmented consciousness that had once been part of Madara dissipated like mist in sunlight. The reconfiguration wave continued outward, spreading first through Eterna City, then across Sinnoh, and eventually reaching toward the shinobi world through the dimensional connections centered on Naruto himself. Everywhere it touched, chaotic reality stabilized, not returning to its original state, but finding new equilibrium that incorporated elements of both worlds without destructive contradiction. After what might have been minutes or hours, time itself had become somewhat flexible during the process. Naruto finally released the crystal, staggering backward as the enhanced perception faded. Hinata caught him before he could fall, supporting his weight as aftershocks of cosmic energy continued to cascade through his system. Did it work? He asked, vision temporarily limited to normal human perception after the overwhelming expansion he'd experienced. See for yourself, Cynthia answered, gesturing to their surroundings. Eterna City had transformed, but not back to its original form. Instead, it had become something new, a harmonious integration of both Sinnoh and shinobi world architectural styles. The ancient statue remained, but now displayed features that somehow incorporated aspects of both Arceus and the Shinigami without appearing monstrous or contradictory. Most importantly, the patches of void had receded, within distinct boundaries that pulsed with Naruto's dual energy signature. You didn't just repair the damage, Hinata realized, her Byakugan confirming what she was seeing. You created a functional interface between dimensions. The only viable solution, Naruto explained, still processing the knowledge that had come with touching the origin crystal. Trying to fully separate the worlds again would have caused more damage than it prevented. They'd progressed too far into convergence. So they'll remain partially merged? Cynthia asked, her scientific mind immediately calculating implications. More like, Connected with controlled boundary zones, Naruto clarified. Areas where transition is possible without complete integration. The physics of each primary dimension remains dominant in its core regions, with blended rules in the interface zones. He straightened, strength returning as his system adjusted to the massive energy expenditure. It's not perfect, and it's definitely not permanent. Just a patch, I guess. Buying time until I can figure out something more sustainable. The origin crystal continued to hover above the statue, but its frantic pulsation had calmed to a steady, measured rhythm that matched Naruto's heartbeat. The geometric shape had simplified somewhat, facets merging and realigning into a more comprehensible structure. And that? Hinata inquired, nodding toward the crystal. A focal point, Naruto replied. It's synchronizing with similar artifacts across both dimensions, creating a network of stability nodes. As long as they remain active, the patch holds. Cynthia's expression showed dawning comprehension. The adamant, lustrous, and gracious orbs in our world, they're changing, aren't they? Becoming part of this network. Naruto nodded. Along with certain objects from our world, the sage's treasured tools, the Geto Mazo, other items with dimensional significance. A new dimensional rift opened nearby, but unlike previous tiers, this one formed with precise, controlled edges. Through it stepped Giratina, still in her humanoid aspect though showing signs of recent conflict in her slightly disheveled appearance. You've surprised me, Godeling, she announced without preamble. The solution you implemented was unexpected and not unwelcome. Coming from you, I'll take that as high praise, Naruto replied with a tired smile. Your domain, secured, for now, she confirmed. The Void Avatar's intrusion caused damage, but nothing irreparable. More importantly, the reconfiguration you initiated has stabilized the boundaries between the reverse and primary dimensions as well. She approached the origin crystal, studying its transformed structure with ancient eyes. You've changed it, simplified its resonance pattern, made it more focused, Naruto corrected. Less potential directions, more stability in the ones that matter. Giratina's expression shifted to one of reluctant respect. Perhaps, Arceus chose better than I initially believed. This solution preserves necessary flexibility while preventing complete chaos. A balanced approach, coming from the embodiment of antimatter and cosmic disorder. This acknowledgement carried significant weight. Naruto accepted it with a nod, too exhausted for verbal sparring. The void entity will return, Giratina continued, her tone turning serious once more. What you accomplished today is containment, not victory. It retreats to gather strength and reassess strategy. I know, Naruto acknowledged. But we've bought time and established defensive parameters. Next time, we'll be better prepared. Giratina raised an eyebrow, shadowy streamers shifting behind her. You include me in your planning, Godeling. You helped when it mattered, Naruto pointed out. Despite your complicated relationship with Arceus and your general preference for chaos over order. That suggests you're not entirely thrilled about the void entity either. A matter of self-preservation, Giratina claimed, though something in her tone suggested more complex motivations. The void consumes indiscriminately, antimatter included. Right, Naruto replied, clearly unconvinced by her affected detachment. So purely selfish reasons. For the first time, something approaching genuine amusement crossed Giratina's face. Believe what you wish, Godeling. Our interests temporarily align, nothing more. Her gaze shifted to include Hinata and Cynthia. Your mortal companions performed admirably under extraordinary circumstances. Few humans could maintain composure when faced with cosmic forces beyond comprehension. They're exceptional people, Naruto agreed, genuine pride evident in his voice. I wouldn't have succeeded without them. Hinata blushed slightly at the praise, while Cynthia acknowledged it with a modest nod. The Sinnoh champion then turned her analytical attention to their changed surroundings. The reconfiguration appears stable for now, she observed. But people will have questions. Both our worlds have experienced fundamental changes to their reality, which means we need to establish communication channels between leadership groups, Naruto concluded. Kakashi-sensei, the Hokage, needs to coordinate with whoever governs this world. The Pokémon League and regional governments, Cynthia supplied. As champion, I can facilitate those connections. Quote, Naruto nodded gratefully. First, I should check on Konoha directly. See how the reconfiguration affected things there. He closed his eyes, concentrating on the enhanced shadow clone he'd sent through the dimensional boundary earlier, the one infused with creation energy for stability. Through their connected consciousness, he perceived Konoha's transformed state. Like Eterna City, the hidden leaf had not returned to its original form but instead evolved into something new. The core village remained recognizably shinobi in design, but certain areas had adopted aspects of Sinnoh architecture. More noticeably, wild Pokémon had begun appearing within the village boundaries, cautious but apparently adapting to their new environment. Most significantly, the Hokage monument, partially erased by void corruption before Naruto's intervention, had been restored, though with subtle changes. The stone faces remained, but now seemed to emerge from the mountain more naturally, as though grown rather than carved. A faint golden aura surrounded them, visible only to those with enhanced perception. Konoha stands, he reported, opening his eyes. Changed, but intact. The void corruption has been contained there as well. Relief washed over Hinata's face. And our friends, the people, adapting, from what I could see. Kakashi-sensei has established research teams to document the changes. Sakura is organizing medical response for anyone affected by the transition. Giratina, who had been examining the transformed statue with scholarly interest, rejoined their conversation. Your training must continue, Godeling. What you've accomplished is merely emergency response, not permanent resolution. I know, Naruto acknowledged, fatigue evident in his voice despite his attempt to hide it. But right now, I need rest. Even partly divine bodies have limits. For once, Giratina didn't argue. The pocket dimension you created would provide optimal recovery conditions. It remains stable despite the reconfiguration, impressively so. That's actually a good idea, Hinata agreed, concern evident in her expression as she noted Naruto's exhaustion. You've expended enormous energy. Proper rest is essential for recovery. And I should report to the Pokémon League, Cynthia added. The sooner we establish official communication protocols between our worlds, the better we can coordinate ongoing response efforts. Naruto nodded, recognizing the wisdom in their suggestions. With a gesture that came increasingly naturally, he opened a portal to the pocket dimension he'd created earlier, the forest clearing that existed solely because he had willed it into being. I'll join you shortly, Giratina informed him, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. Your connection to the origin crystal has accelerated your development. Adjustments to your training regimen are necessary. Looking forward to it, Naruto replied with weary sarcasm. Chi earned him a sharp look from the antimatter deity. Cynthia released her Togekiss, preparing for rapid transit to the Pokémon League headquarters. I'll send word once official channels are established. In the meantime, rest and recover your strength. Both worlds need you at full capacity. With final farewells exchanged, Naruto and Hinata stepped through the portal into his created realm. Cynthia departed on her Togekiss and Giratina simply vanished, not teleporting in the conventional sense, but momentarily existing in multiple locations before consolidating her presence elsewhere. The pocket dimension welcomed them with perfect environmental conditions, temperature, humidity, light quality, all exactly as Naruto had envisioned during its creation. A small structure had manifested near the clearing's edge that hadn't existed before, a simple but comfortable cabin constructed from materials native to both worlds, its design combining Konoha's functional aesthetics with Sinnoh's natural integration into the landscape. Did you make that? Hinata asked, indicating the cabin. Naruto shook his head, genuinely surprised. Not consciously. The dimension must be responding to subconscious needs or expectations. Impressive regardless, she observed as they approached the structure. Your powers develop at an extraordinary rate. Inside, they found the cabin furnished with everything required for rest and recovery, comfortable seating, a functional kitchen, sleeping accommodations. All materialized from Naruto's unexpressed desires for comfort and security. As the adrenaline of crisis response faded, exhaustion hit Naruto with physical force. He sank onto one of the cushioned chairs, muscles trembling with the aftermath of channeling cosmic energies far beyond normal human capacity. Hinata immediately moved to support him, her natural caretaking instincts overriding any hesitation. You need to rest properly, she insisted. Even with your enhanced stamina, what you did would strain anyone. I just need a minute, he protested weakly, even as his eyes struggled to remain open. There's still so much to coordinate. Which can wait until you've recovered, she countered firmly. The dimensional boundaries are stabilized for now. Others can handle immediate response while you regain strength. Too exhausted to argue further, Naruto allowed her to eyed him to the sleeping area, a comfortable bed that somehow combined the familiar style of Konoha furnishings with materials he'd only seen in Sinnoh. As he lay back, the last of his resistance faded. "Stay," he asked simply, reaching for her hand. Hinata's pale cheeks colored slightly, but she nodded without hesitation. Of course. She settled beside him, her presence a grounding force amid the cosmic chaos he'd been navigating. As consciousness faded, Naruto felt the dual energies within him, creation and destruction, gradually finding their own equilibrium, cycling in balanced harmony rather than competing for dominance. His last thought before sleep claimed him wasn't about dimensional crises or divine responsibilities, but much simpler, gratitude for the human connections that kept him anchored when godhood threatened to sweep him away. In the space between sleeping and waking, he experienced not dreams but expanded awareness, his consciousness touching briefly on the network O.F. stability nodes he'd established throughout both worlds, confirming their continued function. Through this connection, he perceived both Konoha and Sinnoh simultaneously, witnessing how communities in both dimensions began adapting to their new reality. And somewhere beyond perception, in the void between existence, something ancient and patient watched, temporarily thwarted but eternally persistent, waiting for the inevitable moment when balance faltered and nothingness could reclaim what had once been its domain. The game of cosmic chess had merely entered a new phase. The pieces were positioned, the players committed, and the stakes remained nothing less than everything that was, is, or ever could be. Chapter 3 End Chapter 4, The Distortion Trials. Naruto awoke to the gentle sound of water flowing uphill. Not metaphorically, literally flowing against gravity's pull, droplets rising like reverse rainfall into a lavender sky streaked with impossible colors. He blinked, momentarily, disoriented before reality reasserted itself. He was no longer in the pocket dimension he'd created, but back in the distortion world. "The sleeping god awakens," came Giratina's sardonic voice from somewhere above him. "How very mortal of you to require rest." Naruto sat up, finding himself on a floating platform of smooth stone that hadn't been there when he'd fallen asleep. Hinata was nowhere to be seen. The last thing he remembered was drifting off in the cabin with her beside him. "Where's Hinata?" he demanded, instantly alert despite the lingering fatigue in his limbs. "And how did I get here?" Giratina descended from above, her humanoid form materializing more fully as she approached. The 6 shadowy streamers behind her shifted like living things, occasionally merging and separating in patterns that hurt the eye to follow. "Your Hyuga companion remains in your pocket dimension, still sleeping," she answered, displaying that unnerving ability to look amused and disdainful simultaneously. "As for your transportation, I brought you here while your consciousness wandered. Gods are most malleable when their awareness is distributed." Naruto stood, instinctively checking High's chakra reserves and finding them mostly replenished. The golden creation energy and shadow destruction power flowed in balanced currents through his network, responding to his emotional state with subtle fluctuations. "You could have asked," he pointed out, annoyed but not truly angry. Something about the distortion world made extreme emotions difficult to maintain, perhaps because the realm itself existed in a constant state of flux, making emotional stability seem oddly redundant. "I could have," Giratina acknowledged without apology. "But time grows short, and your trials must begin properly." "Trials? To stabilize your divine aspects," she explained, gesturing at the chaotic landscape around them. "Your emergency response to the dimensional crisis was impressively intuitive, but dangerously unrefined. Power without control eventually consumes its wielder." She moved to the platform's edge, the distortion world reshaping itself around her with subtle adjustments, floating islands realigning, gravity patterns shifting to create a pathway forward. "Your connection to the origin crystal accelerated your development beyond projected parameters," she continued. "The stabilization network you established buys time, but remains imperfect. Without proper mastery of your dual nature, the patches will eventually fail." Naruto absorbed this with growing concern. "How long do we have?" Difficult to quantify in conventional temporal terms, Giratina replied, frustratingly vague. Dimensional stability follows exponential rather than linear degradation patterns. The current configuration might hold for what you would perceive as months, or collapse within days if subjected to sufficient stress. So basically, we need to hurry but have no idea how much time we actually have, Naruto translated dryly. Typical end of the world scenario. A sound that might have been a chuckle escaped the antimatter deity. Your human perspective remains refreshingly direct, Godeling. She extended a hand, and the pathway before them extended further into the chaotic realm. Come. The first trial awaits. Having little choice, and admittedly curious despite his irritation, Naruto followed. Adapting quickly to the distortion world's unusual physics. Walking on vertical surfaces came naturally to a shinobi, though doing so on paths that occasionally ceased to exist entirely BEF. Or reforming in different configurations presented novel challenges. What exactly are these trials? He asked as they traveled deeper into the realm. The purple-tinged atmosphere thickened around them, occasionally coalescing into shapes that resembled memories or emotions given momentary form. 4 challenges to stabilize your divine aspects, Giratina explained. Creation, destruction, balance, and identity. Each must be mastered individually, then integrated into a coherent whole. They arrived at what appeared to be an arena of sorts, a massive circular platform floating in emptiness, surrounded by smaller observation islands that orbited it slowly. Unlike most surfaces in the distortion world, this platform remained perfectly stable, its geometry unyielding despite the chaos around it. The trial of creation, Giratina announced, gesturing to the arena. Here, you will demonstrate your ability to manifest reality from pure potential. Naruto stepped onto the platform, immediately sensing its difference from the rest of this realm. It didn't just exist differently, it existed more completely, as though occupying multiple dimensional states simultaneously. What am I supposed to create exactly? He asked, practical as always despite the metaphysical circumstances. That, came a new voice, is entirely the point of the trial. From nothingness materialized a figure Naruto didn't recognize, small in stature, with a delicate humanoid form that seemed to shift between solid and translucent states. Its most distinctive feature was coloration, predominantly pink, with large blue eyes that contained ancient wisdom despite their childlike appearance. Giratina acknowledged with a respectful nod, surprising, given her typically dismissive attitude toward most beings. Your involvement honors the proceedings. The convergence concerns all foundational entities, the newcomer replied, voice melodic and genderless. Especially one connected directly to the original one. The being floated, not walked, toward Naruto, circling him with obvious curiosity. So much potential in such an unusual package. Arceus always did prefer unexpected vessels. Your Naruto asked, recalling fragments of information from conversations with Cynthia, the ancestor of all Pokémon. Among other designations, the entity confirmed with what might have been a smile. For this interaction, I've adopted a form your consciousness can process more directly than my natural state. As it spoke, its appearance solidified further, becoming more distinctly humanoid, though still unmistakably not human. The pink coloration remained, now manifesting as an unusual hair color on an otherwise human-looking young person of indeterminate gender, dressed in flowing garments that seemed composed of light as much as fabric. I will oversee your trial of creation, Mew explained, floating gently to rest on the platform's surface. As the being who carries the genetic template for all Pokémon life, creation falls within my domain of expertise. Naruto glanced between the 2 legendary entities, still adjusting to the casual interaction with beings of mythological significance. So what exactly does this trial involve? Creation without purpose leads to chaos, Mew replied cryptically. Creation without limitation leads to corruption. Creation without harmony leads to conflict. The platform beneath them began to glow with intricate patterns, circuits of energy forming a complex array that Naruto recognized as similar to the sealing techniques from his world, but fundamentally different in structure and purpose. You must create something that addresses a need you perceive, Mew instructed, but does so with proper limitations and in harmony with existing reality. Something that could exist within the natural order without disrupting it. That's pretty vague, Naruto pointed out. Deliberately so, Giratina confirmed from where she now observed from one of the orbiting platforms. Divine creation is guided by intent and wisdom, not rigid instructions. The trial tests both your power and your judgment. Naruto took a deep breath, centering himself as he'd learned during sage training. The golden creation energy responded immediately, flowing to his hands in eager anticipation. He could feel its desire to manifest, to transform potential into actuality, almost too eager. Pushing against his control like a living thing. Begin when ready, Mew instructed, floating upward to give him space. But remember, what you create here will not remain confined to the distortion world. It will eventually find its way into the primary dimensions. That added significant weight to the decision. Naruto considered carefully, reviewing what he knew about the current state of both worlds following the convergence event. The stabilization network he'd established addressed immediate dimensional integrity, but other problems remained. Communicati on between worlds was limited to those who could physically cross the boundary zones. Transportation remained challenging for most inhabitants. Understanding between the vastly different cultures was minimal. And most concerning, defense against the void entity's inevitable return remained inadequate. A solution began to form in his mind. Not a creature or object in the conventional sense, but something more abstract yet functional. He extended his hands, golden energy pooling between them as he shaped not just form but concept. I create a network, he declared, the energy responding to his clarified intent. Not physical infrastructure, but a system of connection points throughout both dimensions that allow for communication across the boundary zones. The energy between his palms expanded, forming a miniature representation of interconnected nodes spanning a model of both worlds. Each node pulsed with golden light, creating pathways between them that bypassed conventional space. The nodes will attune to individuals who approach them with genuine need to connect across dimensions, Naruto continued, refining the concept as it took shape. Not unrestricted access, but facilita. TED communication where purposes align with harmony between worlds. Mew circled the manifestation, studying it with ancient eyes. You create not an entity but a system. Interesting approach. PLE need to understand each other if they're going to coexist, Naruto explained. This network creates opportunities for that understanding without forcing it or making it dangerous. The manifestation stabilized, the model becoming increasingly detailed as Naruto refined its parameters. Limitations took shape. Energy requirements to prevent overuse, authentication systems to prevent exploitation. Gradual implementation to allow cultural adjustment. The framework appears sound, Mew acknowledged, but remains conceptual. To complete the trial, you must bring it into actual existence, not just here, but throughout both primary dimensions simultaneously. Naruto nodded, understanding the true challenge now. Creating the concept was relatively simple, manifesting it across multiple dimensions while maintaining consistent function was the real test of his creation aspect. He closed his eyes, extending his awareness through the connection he maintained with both worlds. Through this expanded perception, he located the stability nodes he'd previously established, anchors that already bridged the dimensional boundaries. His creation would build upon this existing framework, adding new functionality without disrupting the stabilization network's primary purpose. With careful precision, he channeled creation energy through these connections, establishing the communication networks. Initial nodes at key locations in both worlds, Konoha and Eterna City first, then expanding outward to other population centers. Each manifestation took form as a crystalline structure that appeared to grow naturally from the environment, blending harmoniously with its surroundings while emanating subtle golden light visible only to those actively seeking connection. The process demanded extraordinary focus, maintaining consistent parameters across vast distances while adapting each manifestation to its specific environment. Sweat beaded on Naruto's forehead as he held the entire network in his consciousness simultaneously, ensuring proper integration without unintended consequences. Finally, the last node manifested, appropriately at the dimensional boundary zone where he'd first arrived in the Pokémon world. The completed network hummed with potential, awaiting activation. It is done, he announced, opening his eyes to find both Mew and Giratina watching him with undisguised interest. Activate it, Mew instructed. Complete the creation. With a final surge of golden energy, Naruto initiated the network. Throughout both dimensions, the communication nodes illuminated simultaneously, not blindingly bright, but with gentle radiance that invited rather than demanded attention. The system was alive, functional, and self-sustaining through the ambient dimensional energy already flowing between worlds. Impressive, Giratina acknowledged from her observation platform. You prioritized connection over isolation, understanding over ignorance. Perhaps Arceus's faith in human perspective was not entirely misplaced. Quote, Mew floated in a slow circle around Naruto, assessing the creation with senses that perceived far beyond conventional reality. The network functions as designed. More importantly, it demonstrates wisdom in its limitations. You did not create unrestricted access that would overwhelm cultural differences, nor did you impose your will upon unwilling participants. Communication requires mutual consent. The platform beneath them pulsed once, the intricate patterns flaring briefly before settling into a steady glow. The trial of creation is complete, Mew declared. You have demonstrated not merely power, but discernment. The creation serves need without imposing disruption. Naruto felt the accomplishment resonate through his being, the creation aspect of his divine heritage stabilizing slightly. Where before it had pushed eagerly against his control, now it flowed more harmoniously, responding to his guidance rather than merely his intent. One trial complete, 3 remain, Giratina noted, descending to join them on the main platform. The communication network will serve both worlds well, but creation alone addresses only part of the cosmic balance. The trial of destruction awaits, Mew confirmed, their form beginning to fade slightly. For that, I must yield to one with greater expertise in unmaking. Before departing, the ancient entity approached Naruto directly. Remember this wisdom, young deity. Creation's true purpose is not merely to bring new things into existence, but to manifest potential that serves the greater harmony. You have shown aptitude for this perspective. With those parting words, Mew's humanoid form dissolved into motes of light that scattered throughout the distortion world before vanishing completely. Theatrical as always, Giratina commented dryly. Come, Godeling. The second trial requires different surroundings. The platform beneath them shifted, the entire arena configuration dissolving and reforming into a new landscape. Where the trial of creation had occurred in open space with clear boundaries, the trial of destruction materialized in a claustrophobic environment, a labyrinth. In structure composed of materials from multiple dimensions, all fused together in chaotic patterns. What is this place? Naruto asked, instinctively on guard as the oppressive atmosphere closed around them. A manifestation of accumulated cosmic debris, Giratina explained, her form seeming more substantial in these surroundings. The remnants of realities that failed, dimensions that collapsed, possibilities that never fully materialized. The refuse of creation. She gestured to their surroundings, where objects and materials from countless unknown worlds fused together in disturbing combinations. Trees with metallic leaves growing from stone that wept like flesh, structures that incorporated biological components still showing signs of life, technologies from unimaginable civilizations now fused with primitive elements in non-functional configurations. Destruction is not merely annihilation, Giratina continued, her voice echoing strangely in the congested space. It is selective removal, purposeful deconstruction. The necessary ending that prevents this. Naruto understood immediately. This place represented unchecked creation without the balancing force of appropriate destruction, an accumulation of everything that should have been allowed to end but somehow persisted in distorted form. Your second trial is simple in concept, challenging in execution, Giratina explained. You must move through this labyrinth, identifying what truly needs to be unmade, and applying your destruction aspect with appropriate precision. Neither too much nor too little. How do I know what should be destroyed versus preserved? Naruto asked, already sensing this would be far more subjective than the creation trial. That discernment is precisely what is being tested, Giratina replied with a hint of approval at the question. Indiscriminate destruction is as problematic as unconstrained creation. You must develop the wisdom to recognize what has reached its natural conclusion versus what retains purpose despite apparent dysfunction. With that cryptic guidance, she gestured for him to proceed into the labyrinth. Unlike the creation trial, she would not be merely observing from a distance. I will accompany you, she explained, noting his questioning glance. Destruction is my domain of expertise. I will not intervene directly, but will provide context when necessary. Some of these remnants are beyond even your expanded perception to fully comprehend without guidance. Naruto nodded, appreciating the pragmatic approach despite Giratina's generally cryptic nature. Together they entered the labyrinth, immediately confronted by the oppressive sensation of too much existence crowded into limited space, reality itself straining under the burden of things that should have concluded but hadn't. The first challenge presented itself almost immediately. A flowering plant that might have been beautiful in its original form, but now existed in a state of perpetual dying without actual death. Its blossoms continually withered and regenerated in an endless cycle, each iteration slightly more distorted than the last. The process was clearly causing the plant continuous suffering. If such a concept applied to botanical life, this exists beyond its natural conclusion, Naruto observed, reaching for his destruction aspect. The shadowy energy responded more irreluctantly than its creation counterpart had, requiring deliberate focus to channel properly. With careful precision, he applied just enough destructive force to unmake the plant's distorted exist. Hence, not erasing it from reality entirely, but allowing its energy to disperse naturally. The plant's form dissolved into particles that briefly displayed its original beauty before fading completely. Appropriate application, Giratina acknowledged. You recognized suffering without purpose and ended it cleanly. They proceeded deeper into the labyrinth, encountering increasingly complex scenarios. Some required obvious intervention. Constructs actively harming their surroundings, entities trapped in states of eternal agony, technologies designed for destruction now operating without direction or purpose. Others presented more ambiguous choices. A creature adapted to survive in conditions that no longer existed, its body painfully transformed but still functioning. A library of knowledge from a civilization long extinct. Information partially corrupted but potentially valuable. A weapon of immense power, dangerous but possibly necessary in the fight against the void entity. Each decision required careful assessment not just of the object's current state, but its potential future impact and historical significance. Naruto found himself relying on both his shinobi training in tactical evaluation and his innate compassion, seeking balance between necessary endings and preserved potential. You hesitate too often, Giratina observed after he spent considerable time deliberating over a particularly complex scenario. Decisive action is sometimes required, even with incomplete information. Rushing destruction seems like a good way to make permanent mistakes, Naruto countered. Finally deciding to partially deconstruct the problematic entity while preserving its core functions. An excessive deliberation allows suffering to continue while you contemplate philosophical nuances, she responded. Though her tone suggested the debate was academic rather than critical. There is wisdom in both approaches, applied appropriately to circumstance. As they progressed further into the labyrinth, Naruto became increasingly attuned to his destruction aspect. Where initially it had responded grudgingly to his call, now it flowed more naturally, still not as eagerly as creation energy, but with growing harmony. He developed finer control, able to target specific components of complex structures while leaving others intact. The final challenge in the destruction trial paired before them as they reached what seemed to be the labyrinth's center, a perfect replica of Konoha, but wrong in fundamental ways. Buildings that resembled those from his home contained impossible internal dimensions. People who looked like his friends moved through daily routines with mechanical precision, their expressions vacant. The entire scene operated like a corrupted memory, preserving appearances while missing the essential life that gave them meaning. What is this? He asked, disturbed by the uncanny simulation. A fragment of possibility, Giratina explained. A version of your world that developed along different parameters, eventually collapsing under its own contradictions. It persists here as a remnant, neither fully real nor completely unreal. These people are not people, she interrupted firmly. Merely echoes, impressions left on reality. They have no consciousness, no true existence. This simulation continues pointlessly, consuming energy that could serve actual life. Naruto understood the final test now. He had to unmake something that resembled what he most cherished, his home, his people, while recognizing it as a hollow simulation that served no purpose except to perpetuate a falsehood. Drawing deeply on his destruction aspect, he extended his awareness throughout the corrupted Konoha. Rather than attacking it directly, he methodically identified the core nodes that maintained the simulation, the fundamental false premises upon which the entire construct was built. With surgical precision, he applied shadow energy to these key points, initiating controlled deconstruction from within. The false village began to dissolve, not violently or chaotically, but with dignified conclusion. Buildings faded like morning mist, the simulacra of people dispersing into particles of potential that could rejoin the cosmic cycle. Naruto maintained perfect control throughout, ensuring the deconstruction remained contained to only what needed to end. When the process completed, nothing remained but empty space, cleansed, available for new possibility rather than trapped in distorted simulation. The trial of destruction is complete, Giratina declared, something like respect coloring her typically sardonic tone. You have demonstrated the necessary discernment between appropriate endings and needless annihilation. The labyrinth around them began to reconfigure, walls dissolving as the accumulated cosmic debris reorganized into something more harmonious. What had been oppressive and congested became open and orderly, not rigid or sterile, but appropriately arranged according to natural cosmic principles. Your destruction aspect stabilizes, Giratina observed. It now responds with appropriate restraint rather than reluctance or eagerness. Naruto felt the change within himself, the shadow energy flowing in closer harmony with his creation aspect, neither dominating nor submitting but complementing its counterpart. 2 trials complete, he noted. What's next? Balance, Giratina replied simply. The most challenging trial, for it requires simultaneous mastery of opposing forces. The environment shifted again, the distortion world reshaping itself into a new configuration. This time, they stood upon a narrow bridge spanning an impossible chasm, one side glowing with golden creative light, the other side shrouded in shadow energy. The bridge itself seemed composed of both energies in perfect equilibrium, maintaining structural integrity through balanced opposition. The trial of balance requires no explanation, Giratina stated. Stepping back to allow Naruto sole access to the bridge. Cross to the center point and demonstrate mastery of dual aspects simultaneously. Seeming simple enough, Naruto stepped onto the bridge, and immediately felt both aspects of his power react violently. The creation energy surged toward the golden side, while destruction power pulled toward the shadows. His body became he battlefield for opposing cosmic forces, each attempting to draw him toward its respective domain. Balance is not compromise, Giratina called from behind him. It is not weakening both sides to reach middle ground. True balance comes from full expression of both aspects in appropriate measure. Understanding theoretically but struggling practically, Naruto attempted to proceed. Each step required extraordinary concentration. His body physically pulled in opposite directions by the polarized energies flowing through him. Golden light and shadow darkness visibly warred across his skin, creating a disruptive interference pattern that made maintaining physical coherence challenging. You resist the conflict, Giratina observed, attempting to suppress both forces to maintain control. She was right. Naruto realized he was instinctively dampening both aspects to prevent them from tearing him apart, effectively weakening himself to maintain stability. Full expression in appropriate measure, he repeated aloud. Grasping the core concept, rather than suppressing the opposing forces, he needed to channel both completely while directing their application with perfect precision. He stopped fighting the polarization and instead embraced it fully. Creation energy flooded his right side while destruction power filled his left, neither diminished in intensity. The visible manifestat ion was striking. His body literally divided down the middle, right half glowing with golden light while his left side embraced shadow. Instead of trying to merge these opposing forces internally, he directed them externally in coordinated application. His right hand extended toward the chasm beneath, creation energy manifesting new structure to support the bridge. Simultaneously, his left hand channeled destruction energy to precisely remove structural weaknesses and instabilities. The approach worked. By fully expressing both aspects for complementary purposes rather than opposing ones, Naruto found he could maintain internal coherence while advancing along the bridge. Each step became more confident than the last as he refined the technique, the opposing forces no longer pulling him apart. art but propelling him forward through synchronized application. Reaching the center point required one final insight. The middle of the bridge contained a circular platform that displayed a complex yin-yang symbol, not the familiar black and white design, but a multidimensional representation showing golden light and shadow darkness in perpetual dance rather than static opposition. To step onto this platform, Naruto realized he needed to internalize the pattern it represented. Not division with cooperation, but true integration where opposing forces enhanced rather than merely tolerated each other. Drawing both energies fully into himself, he stopped directing them outward and instead focused on their interaction within. Rather than maintaining separate golden and shadow halves, he wed the energies to interweave in patterns mimicking the symbol before him, creation flowing into destruction flowing back into creation in endless cycle. The physical manifestation transformed accordingly. Instead of divided halves, his entire form now displayed the integrated pattern, golden light with threads of shadow and shadows illuminated by inner light, constantly shifting yet maintaining perfect equilibrium. With this new integration, he stepped onto the central platform. The symbol beneath him resonated with his achieved balance, glowing with recognition of successful demonstration. The trial of balance is complete, Giratina announced, materializing beside him on the platform. You have transcended simple opposition to discover true cosmic harmony. The integrated energies continued flowing through Naruto's system, no longer requiring conscious control to maintain equilibrium. Like breathing or heartbeat, the balanced cycle had become an automatic function of his evolving divine nature. This feels right, he observed, studying the interplay of golden light and shadow across his skin. Like finding a natural rhythm that was always possible but never realized. The cosmic dance in microcosm. Giratina agreed. Creation flowing into destruction flowing into new creation. The fundamental pattern of existence itself. The bridge and chasm dissolved around them. The distortion world reconfiguring for the final challenge. This transformation took longer than previous ones, reality struggling to manifest the appropriate environment for what was to come. The final trial addresses your greatest challenge, Giratina explained while the surroundings continued shifting. Not power or technique, but identity. What does it mean to be both human and divine? Mortal and God, individual and cosmic force? Quote, the environment stabilized into the most disorienting configuration yet, a perfect replica of Naruto's apartment in Konoha, down to the smallest detail. But surrounding this island of normality was absolute cosmic void, not the hungry nothingness of the void entity, but the infinite potential of unmanifestation, the state that precedes existence itself. The trial of identity, Giratina announced, remaining at the threshold between apartment and void. I cannot accompany you for this one. Each being must resolve their nature alone. Naruto entered the familiar space with mounting unease. Everything was exactly as he remembered. Dirty dishes in the sink, framed photo of Team 7 on the dresser, cup of instant ramen on the table. Yet something felt fundamentally wrong about the perfect replication. As he moved deeper into the apartment, the wrongness intensified. Photos on the wall changed subtly when not directly observed. Furniture rearranged itself slightly between glances. The dimensions of rooms shifted imperceptibly but continuously. What is this supposed to be testing exactly? He called back to Giratina. Who are you, Godeling? She responded cryptically. The boy who lived here. The shinobi who protected his village. The Jinchuriki who contained the 9 tails. The sage who mastered natural energy. Or something else entirely now. Before he could formulate a response, movement caught his eye. Turning, he found himself facing himself. But not quite. The doppelganger appeared as he had before the dimensional convergence, younger, entirely human. Dressed in his traditional orange and black outfit without the subtle alterations his clothing had undergone during his transformation. So this is what I become? The other Naruto asked, voice identical but tone distinctly judgmental. Some sort of detached cosmic entity playing with worlds like their toys. That's not. Naruto began, but was interrupted by another voice behind him. Isn't it though? This second doppelganger glowed with pure golden light, no trace of shadow or humanity in its appearance. We are beyond mortal concerns now. These limited beings live and die in moments while we endure eternally. Their perspective is irrelevant to cosmic scales. A third figure materialized from shadows in the corner, another version of himself, this one read. D in shadow energy with no golden light to balance it. Both of you miss the point. Creation and preservation are ultimately futile. All returns to void eventually. Our purpose is to manage necessary endings with appropriate dignity. Naruto looked between the three manifestations with growing understanding. The trial wasn't presenting external challenges, it was confronting him with fragmented aspects of his own evolving identity. You're all missing something important, he told his doppelgangers. Balance isn't just about cosmic forces, it's about perspective too. The human Naruto scoffed. Easy for you to say from your godhood. Try remembering what it feels like to be powerless, to struggle, to face limitations you can't overcome with divine power. I haven't forgotten, Naruto countered. Those experiences are what make the power meaningful. Without understanding limitation, how can creation have purpose? Without knowing suffering, how can compassion guide destruction? The golden doppelganger flared brightly. Sentiment clouds judgment. Divine power requires detachment from individual concerns. No, Naruto disagreed firmly. Detachment leads to the exact problem we're fighting. The void entity exists in perfect cosmic detachment, seeing only patterns without meaning, existence without value. The shadow version laughed coldly. All meaning is temporary, all value subjective. These are mortal illusions to comfort finite minds. Then why do anything at all? Naruto challenged. If nothing matters, why maintain cosmic balance? Why oppose the void? Purpose itself implies meaning beyond pattern. The three fragments fell silent, seemingly unable to counter this fundamental logic. Naruto pressed his advantage, understanding the trial's true nature now. I'm not choosing between these aspects of myself, he declared, addressing the apartment and void beyond simultaneously. I'm integrating them. Human perspective gives divine power direction and purpose. Cosmic awareness gives human compassion appropriate scope and application. He approached the human doppelganger first, extending his hand. I don't forget where I came from. The figure hesitated, then clasped his hand, dissolving into energy that flowed into Naruto, not disappearing, but reintegrating. To the golden creation aspect, he said, compassion isn't weakness, it's wisdom applied to power. This fragment too rejoined him after momentary resistance. Finally, he faced his shadow self. Endings have meaning precisely because existence has value. We unmake with respect because we understand the significance of being. The shadow doppelganger inclined its head slightly before similarly reintegrating. As the final fragment rejoined him, the apartment began to dissolve, not chaotically, but transformatively. The mundane space expanded, walls becoming translucent to reveal cosmic vistas beyond while maintaining the essential characteristics that made it home. Limited and infinite simultaneously, particular and universal coexisting without contradiction. The trial of identity is complete, Giratina's voice announced from everywhere and nowhere. You have achieved integration without losing distinction. Divinity without sacrificing humanity. Power without abandoning perspective. The distortion world reasserted itself around Naruto, the trial environments fading as normal. Or what passed for normal in this realm, reality returned. Giratina materialized before him, studying him with those ancient red eyes. You have completed all 4 trials, she acknowledged. Creation, destruction, balance, and identity. Your divine aspects are stabilized sufficiently for the challenges ahead. Naruto felt the difference immediately. Where his newfound powers had previously fell. External. Abilities granted rather than inherent, they now flowed as natural extensions of himself. The golden light and shadow energy moved through his system in perfect harmony, neither dominating or submitting but complementing in endless cycle. There's still so much I don't understand, he admitted. The origin crystal, the dimensional network, the void entity's true nature. Understanding comes with application, Giratina replied. Knowledge without experience remains theoretical. You have established the foundation, now you must build upon it. She gestured, opening a portal that showed not his pocket dimension as expected, but Celestic Town, specifically, the research facility where Professor Rowan and Cynthia's grandmother studied ancient artifacts. Through it, he could see Hinata and Cynthia engaged in intense discussion over some form of dimensional readings. Your companions have been productive during your trials, Giratina noted. The Hyuga girls' visual abilities provide unique insights into dimensional boundaries, while the champion's knowledge of our world's history offers contextual understanding neither of us possess. How long was I in the trials? Naruto asked, suddenly concerned about temporal distortion. Time flows differently here, Giratina acknowledged. What felt like hours to you has been approximately 3 days in the primary dimensions. 3 days, Naruto exclaimed. Why didn't you tell me? Would it have changed your approach to the trials? Giratina countered reasonably. Rushing divine development risks catastrophic consequences. Better slightly slower progress than flawed mastery. Before Naruto could argue further, something in the portal's view caught his attention. Behind Hinata and Cynthia, partially obscured by research equipment, stood a figure he recognized with visceral shock. Tall, elegant, white-skinned with distinctive horns and uncanny pale eyes. Kagaya. The name escaped him in disbelief. Giratina followed his gaze with mild interest. Ah yes, the dimensional disruptions have had unexpected consequences. That entity emerged from a pocket dimension connected to your world approximately 36 hours ago. She's supposed to be sealed away. Naruto protested. Sasuke and I imprisoned her with the 6 paths, Shibaku Tensei after the war. And she was, Giratina confirmed casually. The dimensional convergence weakened all such bindings. Many entities previously confined have found themselves unexpectedly liberated. She studied his alarmed expression with academic interest. This one appears significant to you. An enemy. The most dangerous enemy our world has ever faced, Naruto replied grimly. The origin of all chakra in our dimension, mother of the Sage of 6 Paths. Nearly unstoppable even with the combined might of the entire Shinobi Alliance. Fascinating, Giratina murmured, showing more genuine interest than she typically displayed. Yet your companions appeared to be cooperating with her rather than combating her. Naruto looked more closely at the portal's view and realized she was right. Kagaya wasn't being contained or restrained, she was actively participating in the research. Indicating points on a dimensional chart while Hinata and Cynthia listened attentively. This requires immediate investigation, he decided, moving toward the portal with determination. Send me back now. Giratina made no move to hasten the transition. The trials are complete, but their lessons must be applied immediately. This situation presents your first true test of divine judgment. What do you mean? This entity you call Kagaya clearly possesses knowledge and abilities relevant to the dimensional crisis, Giratina observed. Yet you identify her as fundamentally dangerous. The choice of how to proceed, destruction, containment, or rehabilitation, falls to you. Not as a shinobi following established protocols, but as a nascent deity applying cosmic principles. Naruto understood the implicit challenge. His instinctive reaction was to contain or neutralize Kagaya immediately, the reflexive response based on past experience. But his newly integra TED perspective demanded more nuanced consideration. I'll make that judgment after I have complete information, he replied firmly. Reactions without context are dangerous regardless of the power behind them. This answer seemed to satisfy Giratina. A measured approach. Perhaps the trials were not wasted after all. With a casual gesture, she widened the portal to allow his passage. We will continue refining your abilities as circumstances permit. For now, address this unexpected development. Naruto moved to step through, then paused, turning back to the antimatter deity. Thank you, he said simply, for the guidance, even if your methods are frustrating. Giratina's expression registered genuine surprise, an emotion rarely visible on her ancient features. Gratitude is unexpected, though I suppose consistent with your preserved humanity. She inclined her head slightly, not quite a bow, but an acknowledgement between entities of significant power. Proceed with wisdom, Godeling. The true challenges have only begun. With that exchange completed, Naruto stepped through the portal into Celestic Town's research facility. The transition from distortion world physics to conventional reality momentarily disoriented him, his enhanced senses adjusting to the limitations of primary dimensional existence. His arrival did not go unnoticed. Hinata's head snapped up immediately, Byakugan activating reflexively to confirm his identity before she crossed the room in 3 quick steps to embrace him. Naruto-kun, you're back. The relief in her voice suggested his absence had caused more concern than Giratina had implied. We couldn't locate you anywhere in either dimension. He returned the embrace, drawing comfort from her familiar presence after the disorienting trials. Sorry for disappearing. Giratina decided my training couldn't wait for proper goodbyes. 3 days without any communication, Cynthia noted, approaching with more reserved but genuine relief. Even my grandmother's most ancient location techniques couldn't trace you in the distortion world. Naruto's attention, however, had already shifted to the white-skinned figure observing from across the room. Kagaya Otsutsuki stood exactly as he remembered her, and humanly beautiful, unnervingly still, radiating power despite her composed demeanor. The only visible difference was her expression, less arrogant certainty, more cautious assessment. Uzumaki Naruto, she acknowledged, voice precisely as he recalled, musical yet cold, ancient beyond human comprehension. You have changed since our last encounter. And you're supposed to be sealed in a moon-sized prison, he countered, instinctively gathering both creation and destruction energy in balanced preparation. Want to explain how you're standing here instead? Hinata placed a gentle hand on his arm, not restraining, but grounding. Naruto-kun, we've been working with her for the past 2 days. She emerged from a dimensional rift near the Celestic ruins and voluntarily provided critical information about the nature of the convergence. Her knowledge of dimensional mechanics from a chakra perspective complements our understanding of Pokémon world cosmology. Cynthia added, the combined insights have accelerated our research significantly. Kagaya herself made no move to approach, maintaining a respectful distance. The seal you and the Uchiha boy placed upon me was indeed formidable, she explained calmly. It would have contained me for millennia under normal circumstances. But the dimensional convergence created opportunities for reconsideration. Reconsideration, Naruto repeated skeptically. Of purpose and priority, she clarified. Existence itself faces greater threat than any individual ambitions. The entity you call the void represents true emptiness, the absence that predates even my awareness. She gestured to the dimensional charts covering the research tables. I have provided all information at my disposal regarding chakra dimensions and their relationships to primary reality. Knowledge freely given, without coercion or manipulation. Naruto studied her with both conventional and enhanced perception, looking for signs of deception or hidden agenda. What he found instead was something unexpected, genuine concern beneath her composed exterior, and a distinct absence of the man. I see possessiveness that had characterized their previous encounter. You've changed too, he observed. The Kagaya I fought was obsessed with reclaiming all chakra as exclusively hers. A shadow of omething-like regret crossed her perfect features. Isolation changes perception. Eons alone in the dimensional void between sealed imprisonment provides perspective. Some might call it rehabilitation. Or desperation, Naruto countered, not entirely convinced. The void entity threatens you too. It threatens everything, she acknowledged without defensiveness, including concepts beyond your current comprehension despite your evolution. Professor Rowan, who had been observing the exchange while documenting readings from various instruments, finally spoke up. Her insights into dimensional structure have been invaluable. The concept of chakra as a unifying energy that flows between dimensions rather than merely within them correlates with our theories about Arceus's original creation energy. Naruto continued his assessment, now applying the lessons from his trials rather than relying solely on past experience. From creation perspective, Kagaya represented immense potential, knowledge and power that could serve the greater balance if properly directed. From destruction perspective, she remained dangerous, capable of reverting to previous patterns under sufficient stress. Balance required acknowledging both possibilities without committing exclusively to either. You understand I can't just trust you, he said finally. Not after everything that happened. I expect nothing less, Kagaya replied with dignity. Trust requires evidence accumulated over time. I merely request opportunity to provide such evidence. It was a reasonable response, neither demanding immediate acceptance nor offering excessive reassurance. Measured, appropriate to circumstance. Naruto made his decision, applying divine judgment tempered by human understanding. You can continue assisting with research under supervision. Any attempt to accumulate or manipulate chakra beyond basic functional requirements will be considered hostile action. Kagaya inclined her head in acceptance. Reasonable terms. Hinata and Cynthia exchanged glances that suggested they'd expected either more resistance or more acceptance, but not this balanced approach. Your time in the distortion world appears to have been productive, Cynthia observed with scholarly interest. Your energy signature has stabilized significantly. Naruto nodded. 4 trials to integrate different aspects of these new powers. I'll explain the details later. He turned his attention to the research materials. First, catch me up on what I've missed. What have you discovered about the dimensional situation? For the next hour, the group briefed him on developments during his absence. The communication network he'd created during his first trial had already begun functioning throughout both worlds, allowing coordination between key leadership figures in both dimensions. Konoha and Sinnoh's major cities had established preliminary protocols for managing the boundary zones where realities overlapped most significantly. The stabilization pattern he'd established using the origin crystal continued functioning effectively, though Professor Rowan's instruments detected subtle fluctuations during periods of increased human and Pokémon activity across boundary zones. Most concerning, however, were reports of distortion cult activity expanding beyond Sinnoh into other regions of the Pokémon world, and Imilar groups forming in the Shinobi nations, particularly in areas most affected by dimensional blending. They call themselves harbingers of convergence. In your world, Hinata explained, showing intelligence reports from Konoha's Anbu. They believe the dimensional merging is divine will rather than cosmic accident, and actively work to accelerate it. Giratina's influence extends further than anticipated. Cynthia noted with concern. These groups show surprising coordination across dimensional boundaries. Kaguya, who had been listening silently, offered her perspective. The antimatter deity plays a dangerous game. While not aligned with the void entity directly, Giratina's natural affinity for chaos creates vulnerability to void corruption. This assessment aligned with Naruto's own observations during his trials. While Giratina clearly opposed the void entity's total erasure of existence, her methods and philosophy created potential exploitation vectors. She's helping me develop these powers, Naruto acknowledged, but definitely has her own agenda regarding how they should be applied. All cosmic entities do, Kaguya stated with the certainty of one who had effectively been such an entity. Even Arceus pursues specific vision rather than pure objectivity. Divine perspective remains inherently biased by nature and purpose. This insight struck Naruto as particularly relevant to his own evolving situation. If even the original creator deity operated from particular perspective rather than absolute truth, his own developing divinity required continuous critique. Assessment rather than blind confidence. Which is why multiple viewpoints remain essential, he concluded aloud. Hinata's perspective on human impact, Cynthia's knowledge of Pokémon world history. Even your understanding of dimensional mechanics, he nodded to Kaguya, all provide context I wouldn't have on my own. A subtle tremor shook the research facility, instruments briefly displaying erratic readings before stabilizing. Such aftershocks had become common following the primary convergence event, but this one carried distinctive energy signature Naruto immediately recognized. Void incursion, he identified. Already moving toward the door. Small but concentrated. North of town. Hinata activated her Byakugan, extending her visual range to maximum. Confirmed. Approximately 2 kilometers outside Celestic town boundaries. A void pocket approximately 20 meters in diameter has opened in a forested area. I'll handle it, Naruto stated, preparation already underway. Balanced creation destruction energy flowed through his system. We're coming with you, Cynthia declared, collecting her Pokeballs with practiced efficiency. Each incursion provides valuable data on void behavior patterns. Rather than arguing, Naruto nodded acceptance. The trials had reinforced the value of diverse perspectives, particularly when dealing with multidimensional threats. Outside the research facility, he created a simple transportation platform from golden energy, solid but lightweight, designed to carry all 4 of them rapidly to the incursion site. This is new, Hinata observed as they boarded the construct. One of many applications I developed during the trials, Naruto explained, directing the platform to rise and accelerate northward. Controlled creation with specific purpose and limited duration. Quote, even Kaguya showed mild interest in the technique, studying its construction with those unsettling pale eyes that missed nothing. You channel Arceus's essence more efficiently than previously. The balance with Shinigami energy appears stabilized. The platform covered distance rapidly, arriving at the incursion site within minutes. From above, the void pocket appeared exactly as Hinata had described, a perfect sphere of absolute nothingness approximately 20 meters across, hovering just above the forest canopy. Unlike natural geological features that reflected or absorbed light, this phenomenon did neither. It simply wasn't an absence in reality itself. Different manifestation pattern than previous incursions, Cynthia noted, documenting the phenomenon with her research devices. More defined boundaries, less chaotic energy dispersal. It's evolving, Kagaya stated flatly. Adapting to the stabilization network you established. Testing boundaries methodically rather than opportunistically breaching weakened points. Naruto brought the platform to hover at safe distance, assessing the void pocket with both conventional and enhanced perception. The entity within it wasn't fully manifest, more like an exploratory tendril than complete presence, but demonstrated concerning levels of deliberate intent. This isn't random deterioration, he confirmed. It's specifically targeting a weak point in the dimensional boundary. Hinata's Byakugan provided additional insight. The forest below contains a natural chakra convergence point, similar to where the Celestic ruins formed in this world, a place where dimensional walls were already naturally thinner. Standard containment won't be sufficient, Naruto decided, drawing on lessons from his destruction trial. This requires precisely targeted unmaking of the void presence without damaging the surrounding dimensional fabric. He extended both hands, golden creation light flow. Wing from his right while shadow destruction energy emanated from his left. Rather than directing these forces separately as he would have before the trials, he integrated them in continuous flow, creation defining what should exist. Destruction precisely removing what shouldn't. The void pocket responded immediately, contracting slightly before pushing back against his influence. Unlike previous encounters where the void entity operated with mindless hunger, this manifestation demonstrated tactical adjustment, withdrawing from direct confrontation points while probing for weaknesses in his approach. It's learning, Kagaya observed with clinical detachment. Developing rudimentary intelligence through iterative interaction. Not intelligence, Naruto corrected, adjusting his technique to counter the entity's adaptations. Pattern recognition. It identifies effective responses and repeats them without genuine understanding. Even this limited adaptation presented significant challenge. As Naruto worked to contain and diminish the void presence, it repeatedly shifted configuration to minimize impact, behaving less like an inanimate force and more like a predator evading capture. I need to change approach, he realized, drawing on insights from his balance trial. Rather than opposing the void directly, he began creating a specialized dimensional field around it, not attacking the nothingness itself, but establishing fundamental parameters for what could and couldn't exist within that space. Definition by opposition, Kagaya recognized the technique immediately. Estabilis, hing what something is not rather than what it is. Exactly, Naruto confirmed, focusing intently on maintaining the precise energy configuration. The void exists as absence, I'm defining exactly what it's absent from. Creating boundaries it can't cross without contradicting its own nature. The approach proved effective. As the specialized field took complete shape around the void pocket, the entity found itself increasingly constrained, unable to expand without encountering parameters that defined existence in terms it couldn't simply erase. Like water conforming to a container, the void was forced to adapt to boundaries it couldn't breach. With the entity contained, Naruto implemented the second phase of his strategy. Instead of attempting to destroy the void directly, an impossible task given its fundamental nature, he gradually compressed its available space while simultaneously strengthening the surrounding reality. The void pocket shrank incrementally, compressed into increasing smaller volume until it finally collapsed into a single point before winking out of existence entirely. Dimensional displacement rather than destruction, Cynthia observed with scholarly appreciation. You forced it to retreat rather than trying to unmake something that technically isn't made to begin with. The trials taught me to work with fundamental nature rather than against it, Naruto explained. Maintaining vigilance to ensure no void remnants remained. Some things can't be destroyed directly but can be managed through proper containment and redirection. Hinata continued scanning the area with her Byakugan. The dimensional fabric shows no residual damage. If anything, it appears stronger than before, reinforced by your intervention. This matched Naruto's intention exactly. Each encounter with void manifestations provided opportunity not just for defense but for strengthening reality's natural resilience. Like muscle developing through resistance training, Dimension L boundaries could potentially become more robust through properly managed stress and recovery. As they prepared to return to Celestic Town, Kagaya approached Naruto directly, maintaining respectful I stance but clearly intending private conversation. Her expression remained unreadable, but something in her posture suggested unusual hesitation. "You've achieved integration I once believed impossible," she stated without preamble. The balance of creation and destruction aspects functioning harmoniously rather than in opposition. "That's the whole point," Naruto replied. "They're complementary forces, not enemies." A perspective I lacked, she acknowledged with surprising candor. "My approach to chakra was fundamentally possessive. Reclamation rather than circulation, control rather than harmony." She gestured to the forest around them, where natural energy flowed visibly to those with appropriate perception. This convergence event, while catastrophic in many respects, creates possibility for genuinely new cosmic order. Neither your world's system nor this one's, but integration that exceeds both. "That's what I'm working toward," Naruto confirmed. "A stable interface that reserves both worlds' unique aspects while allowing beneficial exchange." Kagaya studied him with those ancient eyes that had witnessed the birth of the shinobi world. "You require additional knowledge I possess. Dimensional mechanics beyond what your shinobi traditions preserved. Information necessary for permanent solutions rather than temporary stabilization. And you're offering this freely?" Naruto asked skeptically. "With condition," she clarified. "Judgment. When stability is achieved and immediate crisis resolved, you must determine my ultimate fate. Not based on past actions alone, but on contribution and demonstrated intent." The request surprised him. Not clemency or escape, but eventual judgment based on complete evidence. It suggested a level of self-awareness and acceptance of consequences he wouldn't have attributed to the Kagaya he had fought. "Agreed," he decided after careful consideration. "Knowledge freely given now, judgment when crisis ends. Fair assessment based on demonstrated choices rather than predetermined conclusion." Something like relief flickered across her perfect features, momentary but genuine. "The dimensional knowledge you require cannot be conveyed through conventional instruction. Direct transfer of understanding is necessary." She extended her hand, palm upward, not demanding contact but offering it as option. "I can share centuries of dimensional insight directly. If you permit connection." The proposal presented obvious risks but potentially critical benefits. Naruto considered it from multiple perspectives, applying lessons from each trial to this unexpected scenario. "Hinata," he called, not looking away from Kagaya. "Monitor this interaction with your Byakugan. Any sign of chakra manipulation beyond simple information transfer, interrupt immediately." Hinata moved to position herself where she could observe both participants with her enhanced vision. "Understood." With that safeguard established, Naruto placed his palm against Kagaya's. The contact initiated immediate information flow, not genjutsu or mental domination, but direct concept transfer bypassing language entirely. Centuries of dimensional observation and manipulation compressed into moments of pure understanding. He perceived the complex relationship between chakra dimensions and physical reality, the mathematical principles governing dimensional interfaces. The cyclical nature of convergence events throughout cosmic history. Most importantly, he gained comprehension of how dimensions could be permanently synchronized rather than temporary. Stabilized, allowing coexistence without eventual collapse. When the transfer completed, Naruto stepped back, processing the vast influx of knowledge. The information itself appeared untainted by manipulation or hidden agenda, pure technical understanding without emotional or philosophical overlay. "This changes our approach significantly," he acknowledged, already seeing applications for dimensional mechanics Kagaya had shared. The stabilization network can be reconfigured to promote natural synchronization rather than artificial separation. "Precisely," Kagaya confirmed. Attempting to fully re-separate dimensions that have begun natural convergence creates perpetual instability. Guided integration prevents chaotic collision while allowing beneficial exchange. Cynthia, who had been documenting the void containment with her instruments, rejoined the conversation. Does this knowledge affect our immediate priorities? Yes, Naruto confirmed. We need to modify the stab ILITY nodes throughout both worlds to promote controlled synchronization rather than rigid separation. It requires precise recalibration of the origin crystal and its connected artifacts. The adamant, lustrous, and gracious orbs. Cynthia identified immediately. Along with your world's sealed objects of power. Naruto nodded. Plus one additional component we hadn't considered, natural chakra. Pokémon energy convergence points throughout both dimensions. They form a natural network we can utilize rather than working against. An elegant solution, Kagaya acknowledged. Requiring significant NTLY less energy expenditure than artificial containment. As they prepared to return to Celestic Town with this new understanding, Naruto noticed something unexpected, a subtle shift in Hinata's EXPR. When Cynthia and Kagaya moved ahead of them. Beneath her typical composure lay uncharacteristic uncertainty. What's wrong? He asked quietly, falling back slightly to create privacy in their conversation. Hinata hesitated before responding. Nothing's wrong exactly. It's just, during your absence, things were complicated. Cynthia and I worked closely together, and She paused, searching for appropriate words. Her interest in you appears to extend beyond professional or academic domains. Naruto blinked in surprise. Cynthia, the champion. Hinata nodded, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. She asked many questions about our relationship, its nature, history, parameters. Initially for research context, but eventually with personal interest. She's quite direct when she wants information. This development caught Naruto entirely unprepared. His relationship with Hinata had been evolving naturally if somewhat slowly, his feelings clear but circumstances repeatedly preventing proper exploration of what they meant to each other. The idea that Cynthia might have romantic interest complicated an already complex situation. And, how do you feel about that? He asked carefully. Confused, Hinata admitted with characteristic honesty. I have no claim on you, Naruto-kun, despite my feelings. And she's extraordinary, brilliant, powerful, accomplished. In some ways, perhaps better suited to your new status. Stop, Naruto said firmly but gently. Don't diminish yourself, Hinata. You've never seen me as just Naruto the troublemaker, or Naruto the hero, or now Naruto the whatever divine thing I'm becoming. You've always seen me completely, without qualification or condition. He took her hand, the simple contact grounding him amid cosmic complexities. Whatever's happening with these powers, whatever I'm becoming, you're my anchor to what matters. To who I really am beneath all of this. The sincerity in his voice brought fresh color to Hinata's cheeks and something like relieved happiness to her eyes. Before she could respond, however, another subtle dimensional tremor reminded them of more immediate concerns. We should rejoin the others, she said practically. This new approach to stabilization takes priority over personal matters. Naruto nodded agreement, though making mental note that they would continue this conversation when circumstances permitted. Together they caught up with Cynthia and Kagaya, who had already reached the transport platform and awaited their arrival. As they returned to Celestic Town, Naruto's and Hank Ed awareness detected something his companions couldn't, subtle observation from multiple dimensional vantage points. Giratina monitored from the distortion world, her interest in his developing abilities evident. Something that might have been Arceus, or a fragment of its awareness, briefly touched his consciousness from another plane entirely. Most concerning, however, was the distant but unmistakable attention of the void entity itself, not immediate threat, but patient assessment. The cosmic chess game continued with pieces moving into new positions, strategies adjusting based on demonstrated capabilities. The trials had prepared him for balanced application of creation and destruction. Now came the greater challenge, applying that balance to protect worlds in collision while navigating increasingly complex personal relationships. Divine power complicated by human heart, cosmic responsibility tempered by mortal connection. Whatever came next would test not just his newfound abilities, but his fundamental identity, the integration of human and divine that made him unique in the multiverse. Chapter 4 End. The End. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.